We begin with the first item of the backbench business. Will be a general debate on Scotland's place in the United Kingdom. It is Mr William Bain to move, and will be an opening speech of 10 minutes. Can I warn everybody it will be 5 minutes thereafter, apart from the wind-ups. Mr William Bain.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. Let me begin by thanking my honourable friend, the member for North East Derbyshire, and the honourable members who serve on the Backbench Business Committee for granting the House this opportunity to debate a proposition which will dominate much of this referendum year across our islands, namely Scotland's place in the United Kingdom. As no doubt we shall hear in the contributions in this debate, this is a question of identity, of economics, and above all, a battle of visions for the future of Scotland, but one with huge implications for the future of other multinational states across the world. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I reject the binary and false choice that some seek to make in this debate, that people have to choose between Scottishness or Britishness and cast their vote accordingly on September the 18th. I am a proud Scot, but see no contradiction between that patriotism and my strong sense of Britishness. Hear, hear. Nor indeed my additional citizenship of the European Union. And in an increasingly interconnected world, characterised by ever-evolving apps and networks, the concept of mutually exclusive identities does not reflect the real lived experience of billions of people. Before I was elected to this House, Mr Deputy Speaker, I worked in universities in both Glasgow and London. I saw the challenges they faced in common. I never looked upon the young people from East London that I taught in this great city as strangers or foreigners. In fact, they were often fascinated by the study of devolution in my constitutional law classes. But I knew them as people I share an identity with and want to carry on sharing a state with for the benefit of all of us. I will.
In this debate about the future of a union, will you acknowledge that the union is not merely between Scotland and England, but Wales and indeed Northern Ireland as well?
Absolutely. My honourable friend makes a very important point, and I'm pleased that we have members from all parts of the United Kingdom in the Chamber for this debate. Mr Deputy Speaker, as a student I campaigned for a devolved Scottish Parliament. I marched to the Mound in Edinburgh, never with a flag in my hand, but with hope in my heart that powers should be exercised at the most appropriate level for the purpose of improving the lot of ordinary people in Scotland. I did so because I believed, and still do, that decision-making over many public services and many economic policies are best exercised at a more localised level. But I also strongly believe in retaining the advantages of a collective macroeconomic framework, of a collective social security system, and cross-UK business, borders and diplomatic policies, which are used to promote greater justice here at home and across the world. Now let us recognise the great good that the Scottish Parliament has been as a force in politics in Scotland, on housing policy, on land reform, and no more so than this week, when it passed its own bill in its own way in securing equality before the law for LGBT people living in Scotland. But this was an expression of Scotland's values being complementary to, not divergent from, those in other parts of the United Kingdom. Mr Deputy Speaker, the devolution settlement has evolved before. It will change again in 2015 and 16, with significant new financial responsibilities over borrowing and income tax, and it can accommodate further reforms in the future. In the referendum in 1997, the late John Smith was proven correct. Strong devolution within the United Kingdom was the settled will of the Scottish people. In this referendum, I believe we will express that loudly and clearly again.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. My understanding of the position of the Labour Party in Scotland is that they favour the full devolution of income tax powers to the Scottish Parliament. Yet yesterday we had a speech from the 1970s from the honourable member for Pontypridd in the Welsh Grand, when he said that any fiscal devolution is tantamount to destroying the fabric of the British state. Can he explain to the House of Commons and to the people of Scotland what exactly is the position of the Labour Party in relation to fiscal devolution?
I just help Mr Edwards to know that he was on the list, and what I don't want to do is keep banging people down because they're going to intervene. I don't want to stop debate, I don't mind interventions, but please make sure they're short, brief and not continuous. William Bain.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to continue a focus on positivity in this debate. I would simply point out to the honourable gentleman that the one party that was inconsistent in its approach to the tax powers being devolved in the 2012 Act was the party that he is sitting alongside on the adjacent bench. Mr Deputy Speaker, as a result of the Edinburgh Agreement, Scotland faces a choice between two futures in the September 18th referendum. An optimistic path, where we build on the strength of the devolution settlement and common institutions like the Bank of England to make our economy more productive, where ordinary people share more in the benefits of growth. Or a pessimistic path, which implies that erecting borders is more important than bringing down barriers to inequality and lack of opportunity across these islands. I will give way once more. Yeah.
I'm very grateful. The honourable gentleman says he wants to make a positive case, and I think that's something we should reflect on, that we're having a debate about significant constitutional change, and having a debate like this in this tone is a good thing. If he's making a positive case and the party that he represents knows what it wants to do with further powers to the Scottish Parliament, is it really true that some of his colleagues are going to boycott his own party conference, which is this true or is it not true? True or not true?
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I mean, that is a very odd intervention, because I'm looking forward very much to my party conference in Perth, and I've already booked my rail tickets to go there. And I will enjoy campaigning in the honourable member for Perth and North Perthshire's wonderful city when I'm there as well. Mr Deputy Speaker, there is no silver bullet solution resulting from statehood, nor an instant answer to declining living standards by redrawing lines on a map. It will take work from politicians at every level of governance, together with civic society and engaged citizens across these islands, to work together so that ordinary people share more fairly in the wealth that they produce, to reform our banking system, to work towards a more universal childcare system, and to reverse the long-term youth unemployment, low business investment and weak productivity crises before they cause long-term damage to the fabric of our country. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, we must reshape lives, not reorder our geography. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm optimistic about Scotland's future as the home of groundbreaking initiatives on science and research, supporting high-level manufacturing and enhancing the huge international reputation of our universities and colleges. Scotland's economy can have a great future as a beacon for investment in renewable energy if we combine our natural resources with the strength of UK investment networks and markets. I see a Scotland where through UKTI we increase our share of global trade, creating thousands of jobs in manufacturing, including in our largest manufacturing sector, our burgeoning food and drink exports industries. We can remove the barriers to work and opportunity for tens of thousands of women in Scotland by creating a more universal childcare system, one of the biggest drivers of increased prosperity for working households with children. We can support sectors of the economy which create high-skilled, higher-paying jobs, and we can deliver a revolution in workplace skills to make progression within a job and a career a reality for millions. Now, our ambition, Mr Deputy Speaker, must be to create a society with better health and educational outcomes, and which uses the strengths of every level of government to eliminate in-work and out-of-work poverty in Scotland, described so starkly this week by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, such a vision can only be delivered on foundations which are secure, not built on sand. If Scotland is to prosper rather than merely survive, we need sterling as our strong and guaranteed currency, backed by a monetary, fiscal, banking and political union anchored with the Bank of England as our central bank. If Scotland is to thrive rather than languish, we need a single market in goods, capital, labour and products across the United Kingdom, with no internal barriers to ambition or trade. And if Scotland is to walk tall in the world, tackle global poverty, hunger and disease, as well as deal with climate change, we need the strongest representation through the United Kingdom in the range of international bodies, stretching from the G8 to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Commonwealth, the UN Security Council, the Council of Europe, and yes, the European Union. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, the only way we can bolster these foundations is by rejecting separation and endorsing devolution and full partnership within the United Kingdom. Mr Deputy Speaker, I look forward to the contributions which are to come in this debate. I reflect upon the fact that the nature of our politics has to change in Scotland too. The spirit of unity that we saw in 1999 has sadly turned into an air of rancorous bitterness. If, as I hope, we achieve a strong and decisive vote in favour of devolution and against separation, people in Scotland need to move forward not as divided tribes of devolutionists or nationalists, consumed by enmity from this referendum, but filled with a shared political destiny. I hope that we can reach out the hand of friendship to those on the other side of the debate and begin a conversation the way my right honourable friend for Paisley and Renfrewshire South has indicated, to move beyond the low divisiveness of these times into the uplands of how Scotland can thrive within the strength of the United Kingdom. I look forward to hearing the rest of this debate, but my wish, Mr Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, is that by the end of this year we can proceed in one direction, as one people, one Scotland, as part of one United Kingdom whose best days are ahead of us.
Question is on the order paper. Andrew Tyree.
Well, I'm in the unusual position of agreeing with just about every word I've heard from the benches opposite. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the very short time available, I want to say a few words about the consequences of independence for currency arrangements for both the rest of the UK and for Scotland. I ought to be clear right at the start. The Scots are not without options. They could create their own currency, whether pegged or free-floating. They could create a currency board. They could join the euro. All these options are available. But the front runner in some quarters seems to be the creation of a formal single currency with the rest of the UK. In the current economic and political circumstances, I don't think this should be attempted, and in the 4 minutes I now have available, I'm going to try and explain why. This is because primarily a British monetary union would need something dramatically tougher than Eurozone rules. So tough that on both sides of the border, if fully explained, I'm confident our respective electorates would not want it. And they'd be right. It would amount to a common fiscal policy between independent countries, a massive undertaking to design and sustain. For a start, I'll give way.
Point, if I may. Was my honourable friend struck, as I was, by the graphs at the end of Governor Carney's speech, the Treasury output, which showed that banking in Scotland would represent 12.7 times the economy, that is 5 points greater than the 7 times for Iceland, and would make banking unsustainable in Scotland without the kind of currency union provisions that he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I hope I get overtime for these interventions. But on that point, I think it's absolutely, I haven't had it yet, I notice on screen, I think it's absolutely crucial that we understand fully that a banking union could well trigger migration of banks to benefit from the lender of last resort facilities of the Bank of England, and therefore migrate to London. I want to get on to what fiscal policy really would entail. It would mean pre-approval of budget proposals, for example. It would mean accompanying that pre-approval with intensive and very intrusive oversight of budgetary outcomes. Rigorous powers to insist on overshoots being corrected quickly and reversed would need to be backed up by credible sanctions for non-compliance. Such powers to carry credibility would probably need to be directly applicable in law on both sides of the border. What this means in practice is that the Bank of England and the Treasury would have the power to direct a large part of Scottish economic and financial policy. For example, the Scots would probably be required to seek their approval from the rest of the UK, to seek their approval before they could borrow to build schools and hospitals. Now, is it realistic to imagine that all those in Scotland who had just voted for independence would readily accept such intensive supervision and direction from the rest of the UK? I doubt it. What's more, I will give way.
It's an interesting assessment that the chair of the Select Committee is making, but of course it's not necessarily the case. If the stability arrangements were done at the aggregate deficit or debt level, and both countries were required to adhere to them, then this line-by-line scrutiny of spending plans that the gentleman describes simply wouldn't be necessary, would they?
Here's a shovel. Countries in the Eurozone were required to abide by the Growth and Stability Pact. Look where that took us. Yeah. We need something much more robust than that to make a currency union work. And I'm not sure, indeed I'm pretty confident, it would not be acceptable, any more acceptable in Scotland than it will be in England. But I want to come on to the effects of this in the rest of the UK. A currency union would have to be a two-way street. Now, is it realistic to expect the rest of the UK, much the bigger partner, both economically and by population, to accept Scottish oversight of fiscal policy here? Is it realistic for the rest of the UK to risk the need for what most durable currency unions have in the end all required, more fiscal transfers? Is it realistic to expect the rest of the UK to sign up to a currency union that could carry the risk of all those rules, albeit tough rules, failing, possibly triggering the need for bailouts? I don't think that such arrangements would be acceptable to the electorate. What's more, I doubt that a majority could be mustered for them in this House of Commons. Of course, the leaders of both countries might try to get a currency union past their respective parliaments without fully explaining the consequences. That's why I'm on my feet now, to try and prevent that. There are shades of the Eurozone with this attempt, but it would be a fool's errand. A currency union created in such circumstances would sooner or later be tested by the markets. Either the rules would be tough enough to bite, or if they weren't tight enough, there might be a bailout. Or we might get the pain of a bailout, both the pain and the bailout. The pain of the bailout south of the border and the pain of the biting of these rules north of the border, as we've seen in the Eurozone. Mr Deputy Speaker, not enough attention has been paid to the political consequences of botching these currency arrangements. Whatever the economics of trying to create a currency union, it seems to me it's bad politics for these islands at this point. The Eurozone has provided a reminder not just of the economic difficulties of creating durable currency unions, but of the political damage and fallout that comes with flawed arrangements. We need, above all, to put what Lord Lang called in the other place the politics of grievance behind us, as we make this effort to renew the relationship between the rest of the UK and Scotland. It seems to me that a currency union would risk the opposite. As the full implications of a currency union became clear, it would create just those conditions for lasting resentment on both sides of the border. And it's just such resentment that we must do everything to avoid in the search for stable economic and political relationship between both sides of the border. Now, I urge the governments on both sides of the border to explain how all the difficulties that I've been outlining could be addressed, and well before the Scottish referendum. Not to do so, it seems to me, would be to deceive our respective electorates that there is some third way, some relatively painless option, enabling the Scots to imagine that they are fully in control of their own affairs and that the rest of the UK can avoid large contingent obligations. If, as I have concluded, in the current circumstances those difficulties cannot be adequately addressed, then in my view those governments should rule out a currency union now.
And I've saw what.
Mr Speaker, the next few months are big ones for Scotland. The decision that Scots take on the 18th of September is one which will shape our country, indeed our families and our future generations to come. And I am proud that in the campaign I will argue loudly for Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom. proud of the part that Scots have played in the success that is the United Kingdom, and proud of the role that the Labour movement has played in that success too. Proud of our achievements over the past 100 years, when we worked together to meet the common challenges people faced in towns and villages across the UK. When 70 years ago people were faced with inadequate healthcare and opposition for vested interests, it was the Labour movement who thought of, fought for and created a system of healthcare for everyone based on need, not nationality, right across the UK. We did that together. When there was no safety net for people out of work, no support for families and children, it was a Labour movement that thought of, fought for and created the UK-wide welfare state. We did that together. And remember when some workers were paid just £1 or even £2 an hour? It was a Labour movement that thought of, fought for and delivered the national minimum wage for everyone right across the UK. And such has been the impact of the living wage. It is now seen as the expectation and not the exception. And no one in the Labour movement said, we can't do any of that because we were part of the UK. We all did that because we were part of one family in the United Kingdom, not because we were competing with each other within the United Kingdom. And the NHS, the welfare state or the national minimum wage are examples of the real transformative effect working together across the UK can have. Big examples because we are a big movement of big ideas. Ideas that are bigger than independence will ever be. We have never been a movement where we turned our back on others. Never said, you're on your own. Never said, you fight your own fights. Always where we have said, we will pool and share our resources for the benefit of all. Happy to give way.
Would you give us an idea as to the thinking on his benches about the extent to which they would agree to allow Devo Max, including a greater degree of fiscal autonomy, which fell short of complete independence?
That's a rather interesting point. He, like everyone else, can wait for our full report on the Devolution Commission that will be published at the conference in March. Indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker, when the Bank of England Governor was busy making the SNP's plans for a currency union last week, he was keen to point out that a key ingredient of a successful union was the need to, and I quote, mutualise risks and pool fiscal resources. That is exactly what we have right now, a redistributive union, a wealth-sharing union, where a contribution from all to the common pot means that those in most need benefit from the common weal. Corporation tax is a great example. Happy to give way.
For giving way, and I certainly agree with the thrust of his comments so far. Is he alarmed, as I was, when I read a Twitter, allegedly from a leading member of the Yes campaign, saying that he hopes that would it be great if Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrison's and Asda just left Scotland after the Yes vote? What message does that send to people trying to create productivity and jobs in the brave new Scotland?
In the continuous pursuit of positivity, I think that one quote, who actually wasn't from a leading member of the Twitter sphere, it was actually the communications director of the Yes Scotland campaign that made those comments. I think that demonstrates that the positivity is on only one side in this debate in Scotland. Mr Deputy Speaker, I was talking about corporation tax, and the reason why corporation tax is a good example is because that demonstrates it's not just tax raised from Scottish companies, but tax raised from businesses right across the UK, which is redistributed across the UK where it's most needed. Just as we all remember when the Royal Bank of Scotland was in trouble and needed bailing out, and taxpayers from across the UK stepped in to help. No questions asked and no IOUs demanded. And look at the circumstances today, where we see the tragic circumstances across parts of England with flood damage. Again, it's taxpayers from across the UK who will pool and share resources to help out. Again, no questions asked or no IOUs demanded. Just a recognition that in times of trouble, people from across the UK stand shoulder to shoulder. And now, when energy bills are going up, but the price and value of wages is falling, when household budgets are being squeezed and household incomes aren't keeping pace with the rate of inflation, the answer is not to turn our back on the rest of the UK, but rather to come together as we have always done to tackle our biggest challenges head on. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is also right that Scots are in the room when the big decisions that affect their lives are being taken. When interest rate decisions on the cost of Scottish mortgages or car loans are being taken, it is right that Scottish voices are heard. When the regulation of financial and banking markets, which affects every one of us across the UK, are being agreed, it is right that Scottish voices are heard. Unfortunately, that is not the position of others. Their position is to diminish or to mute the voice of Scots, to take us outside the room when decisions are being taken. Don't take my word for it. The SNP's own Jim Shillers this week described it as stupidity on stilts. I am clear, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Scots speak louder and do more as part of the UK. It's a can-do attitude which is unfortunately not shared by others.
The honourable friend give way.
Happy to give way.
Does my honourable friend share my surprise with a government that has the power to introduce further provisions on childcare decides that it can only deal with it until after it gets the right result in a referendum?
I think what that demonstrates is you have a government in Scotland that is determined to win women's votes, not actually change women's lives. And that's why you need a Labour government both in this place and, I believe, at Holyrood too. Now, some argue that you cannot deliver social and economic change until and only when you have constitutional change. But the truth is very different. The fact is that the big challenges we face in reducing poverty and inequality cannot be put on pause until after September 2014. But it's not surprising that they are using the extent of constitutional change as their measure of success. Labour has always been and is about so much more. For the Labour movement, the status quo is something we have never argued for. Indeed, it's something we have always fought against. For us, the real measure of success is the extent of economic and social change and the positive impact it has on people's lives. That is why, no matter what side you are on in this referendum debate, this is a change referendum. And that's why we believe that we will argue for a strong voice across the UK, a strong Scotland within a united kingdom.
Deputy Speaker, may I congratulate those in the Backbench Committee who have allocated this time to this particularly important debate, and congratulate those who have contributed in the debate so far. It has been very thoughtful, and I hope we will be able to maintain that tenor as we go through the rest of the afternoon. That may be wishful thinking on my part. We've got a big moment coming up in a few months' time, as has been acknowledged by everybody who's spoken so far. The election in 2011 was transformational, and finally we are focused on this big choice between Scotland going it alone or staying part of the most successful family of nations ever known across the world. It's hardly a surprise that I want Scotland to stay part of the United Kingdom. But it's based not just on my upbringing and my experience in the borders and elsewhere in Scotland, but particularly as my experience as Secretary of State for Scotland, a post that was a great privilege to hold. Not least, if I may say in passing, because of the people I worked with there, a great team of civil servants, special advisers and others who did an immense amount with a very small team, producing the Scotland Act, the biggest transfer of financial powers from this place to Edinburgh since the Act of Union, and supporting me in the work that we did on the Edinburgh Agreement as well. It wasn't just those two moments that were important. For me, it was the chance to get out and about around the country and see this fantastic country that we all call home and that we're proud to be from and proud to represent. I think of the young woman in Glasgow who had been given an opportunity through the Job Centre and through Skills Development Scotland to get some training and to work up a business plan which she wanted to develop into something big. She had the vision, she wanted to go for it. I think of the woman business leader in Fife who'd taken a small family agricultural business and developed it with her family into something across the United Kingdom and indeed across Europe, and for whom her vision was a very expansive and positive one. And I think too about the oil and gas sector, which for those from Aberdeen and the North East of Scotland, including my right honourable friends obviously amongst that and friends from across the other side of the chamber, it is a precious jewel that we argue over the politics of it all the time, but I doubt that we really truly appreciate in Scotland just what it does. All the different people who are highly skilled working in Aberdeen and the North East, from our constituencies as well as in the North East of Scotland. A great future, but also a big challenge coming in a few decades' time, and something that perhaps all of us should be thinking about now. But a great privilege to learn much more about that and to see that not just now, but in the future, once the oil and gas is finished, the opportunity that will be there for all of us. And all those miles travelled around Scotland over 3.5 years just reinforce my basic sense of what it is for Scotland in the UK. That we have fantastic economic opportunities, not just about being part of this huge single market of the UK, not just about having a great platform in the world to promote our goods and services through UKTI and others, but also because we have the right attitude, we have the right approach to connecting with the international businesses.
Is he aware of the concern amongst some businesses who have taken advantage of UK representation around the world that if Scotland was independent, effectively the UK Foreign Office network would be competitors to a Scottish one rather than allies in achieving our economic success?
I think it would be a terribly sad situation to be in, and I saw myself last March when I was part of an energy showcase in Rio de Janeiro where Scottish Development International was partnering with UKTI and the consulate there to promote Scottish business, Scottish skills on an international stage, but supporting one another in doing that. We do not want to lose that scale and that ability. It's not just about our opportunity, it's also about our resilience, and we've had references already to the banking collapse of a few years ago. The Right Honourable Gentleman, who was Chancellor at the time, is in his place today. He can say more about this, I'm sure. But the fact that we had the whole of the UK standing behind us in Scotland was massively important to the ability to work through what were very difficult times, a legacy of which is still with us today. So.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. Is he aware of the evidence that was given by the Business Secretary to the Biz Select Committee yesterday, where he said he thought it was likely that RBS would relocate its headquarters to London if Scotland voted for independence?
That my right honourable friend's evidence has been well reported, and I think most people looking sensibly at the options understand that is a real possibility, perhaps more than that, a probability. The reality is we have to think through all of these different things. We have to think what it is we have at the moment that's very special and what might be given up if we were to vote for independence. Apart from the economic issues, and we'll debate them at length, I'm sure, there's also our place in the world. I believe, because of our proud record in reaching out to the world, Scots are delighted that we have half of the DFID workforce and policymakers in Scotland, a few miles from Glasgow and East Kilbride and the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, a fantastic place to visit. There we are, Scotland, punching above our weight internationally through that policy work, but also because we're part of a country that is now reaching the UN target on international development. We have greater security too, I believe, as part of NATO, by being at the top table in the UN Security Council and so much else. And as others have already said, the fact that we are part of this great family of nations, where, okay, on the rugby this weekend we might be divided temporarily or hiding under the duvet, depending on what we expect the outcome to be, but we'll set aside our differences shortly after that. And certainly in my part of the world, in the borders, we understand more than most about the family of nations that we have, where the 500-year echo of Flodden that we think about at this particular moment reminds us of what went before and why we mustn't let those divisions ever return. I don't want to see that. I don't believe most people in Scotland do either. We, of course, have challenges about health and inequality. We have challenges about infrastructure. We have challenges about transitioning and transforming our economy. I just simply believe that if we use the powers we have already, the new powers that are coming, and we discuss sensibly about further powers that might be added to them on tax, on borrowing, on employment support, if we work together across party, across Scotland and with the rest of the UK, we have a very positive future. We should channel our energies into that, not seek division, not seek separation. I'm proud to be Scottish, I'm proud to be British, and I hope together we can keep this family of nations together.
Jimmy Head.
Mr Speaker, and can I say that it will come as no surprise to any of my colleagues in here, including the sitting Secretary of State and the two former Secretaries of State, my first comments. It's good to have a debate on Scotland. I have to tell you there's a long list of speakers and people are already complaining about the time they're going to be given to take part in this debate, and yet they deny themselves. Both front benches deny themselves eight grand committees a year to discuss Scotland. And I just make mention today, the Leader of the House was boasting about being at a Welsh Grand Committee yesterday where he was discussing devolution. Now, I just make that point as I rise to my feet to make my contribution. I've got that off my chest, I can now go on. Mr Speaker, I wish to make a few points in the 4 minutes or so I've got left. Firstly, I want to talk about membership of the European Union. I was the chairman of the European Legislation Select Committee from 1992 to 1998, and its successor, the European Scrutiny Committee, from 1998 to 2006. 14 years I was the chairman of the Select Committee dealing with European legislation, and in particular during that term of office, enlargement. I scrutinised, along with my colleagues on that committee, the application of Finland, Sweden and Austria when it increased from 9 to 12. And then we had what we called the Big Bang of the 3 Baltic states and the 7 Central European states who joined. And I began the process of Romania and Bulgaria. And we now know, and that was, 6 years ago, and we now know they've just joined the European Union fully now. So whilst never claiming to be an expert on anything, I do know a little bit about European legislation. And in spite of the lie told to Andrew Neil in a television interview that the First Minister when the Scottish Government had legal opinion to back up their automatic membership of the European Union, which was proved to be a lie, I just think it is distasteful that this debate, this important debate, is wasted by that sort of atmosphere. When we have debate, this place is about debating and democracy for centuries. But it's surely a debate on the merits of what the proposition is, and not a debate on the quality of what is propaganda. And propaganda is not about political debate, in my view. Propaganda is about selling a pup, and there's a pup for sale in my country and for my constituency, and I am strongly against it. Mr Speaker, I know the SNP are lying on Europe. I know they're lying on Europe. I know they're lying on pensions and welfare, and I know they're lying on how to keep the pound. Mr Speaker, but I want to say this, even if they were right, even if there was a grand, great thing at the end of the rainbow for the Scottish SNP and their debate for independence, I'll be honest, I'm still against it. And if the Scottish people are going to be better off economically, etc., I would still be against breaking away from the Union. And that's part of my history. I was born and proud to be born into a mining family and a mining community. where it wasn't about self or betterment. You don't make judges on people the side of the road they're born on, the same as you don't make judgments the side of the bed you were born on. I'll give way to the honourable lady.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and I very much welcome his comments that his views aren't based on whether individual Scots would be better or worse off. Does he agree with me that many of us on these benches have a bigger vision that's about the whole of the country and redistribution within the whole of the country, and that we need to see real distribution to all of the poorer areas in this country?
Well, of course. Wherever you see poverty, you have empathy with those who are suffering it. And poverty is just as, and we've heard it said it many times, poverty is just as important to us in the river of the Thames than the river of the Clyde. And that's always been the case. And I hear what the mutterings is behind me, and I'll try not to put off, like I'm becoming a bit used to it. Mr. Speaker, 30 years ago, on the 5th of March, I was proud to have been involved in the miners' strike, fighting for my community, for my campaign, and for my values, and mine and community values. And we were fighting against a lying government then. And the lying government was the lying Westminster government. And I am fighting against a lying government now in the Scottish Parliament. And in 30 years' time, when somebody asked the question, what was you doing in 2014? Whose side were you on? Whose side were you on? They'll be able to say, my grandchildren will be able to say that he was on the side of Scotland and opposed divorce and separation.
Order! Order! Time is up, unfortunately. There's much I wanted to hear more. Rory Stewart.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. 1,900 years ago, Rome divided Britain with a wall. It's an island whose natural boundaries are the sea. And this wall split families, split tribes. Ever since that moment, we have been debating this issue. And these two fundamental principles in Britain are what we are debating today. They are in competition. Are we divided, nation against nation, or are we unified by culture and language? And there is only one answer to that question. It cannot be simply economics. If a relationship is going wrong, if a marriage is going wrong, the answer cannot simply be to say, you can't afford to break up because you're going to lose the house. The answer has to be only one thing, which is, I love you. And the nature of that love that we express for Scotland, the nature of that love which we express for Scotland, we in this House are struggling to express. We're not very good as politicians in talking about emotions. We've become very bad at it. But we need to learn to do it, because otherwise a party which is trying to reduce, that is trying to shrink, that is trying to vanish will win. What do we mean when we say that I, as a Member of Parliament for an English constituency, love Scotland? Well, it will be personal to every single one of us. Could be that we love intellectual seriousness. I was in a boat with the Honourable Member for the Western Isles. He was in a canoe with me a few months ago. We were rowing along, and I would really miss the Honourable Member from that canoe. And from the United Kingdom, we would miss Scotland for different personal reasons. For Scotland's egalitarianism, for Scotland's intellectual seriousness, for Scotland's sense of realism, for Scotland's sense of humour. I would be very ashamed and embarrassed to be part of a country that wouldn't have the Scottish Member of Parliament here.
As an expert in foreign affairs, could he tell the House how much stronger Scotland would be as an independent country in relation to the world?
Well, thank the Honourable Member for Motherwell very much. I think there are two answers to that question. One is, of course, Scotland must embrace the potential of being part of the United Kingdom in foreign affairs, but also that the honourable member himself represents what is good about our political settlement. The fact that the honourable member sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee, that there is a Scottish voice on that committee raising again and again Scottish issues, forcing us in this chamber to focus on Scottish issues when we think about foreign policy, is something that we will deeply, deeply miss and lack. There is, of course, a great appeal to Scottish nationalism. We all feel it. We all feel it in our gut. And we feel it for this reason. The world is bewildering. People are angry. 85% of people in this country feel politics is broken. 87% of people feel society is broken. Our voters feel Westminster is out of touch. They feel their lives have never been so complicated. These are real things that we have to acknowledge and accept. But the answer to those problems is not to get smaller. When we face in our everyday lives complexity, when we face things that are bewildering, when we feel angry, when we feel disappointed, the answer is not to get smaller and shut the door and pretend that we can shut those things out. The answer is to expand. So in the very brief time remaining, 3 suggestions on what lessons we need to take from Scottish nationalism. The first lesson is that it isn't simply that Westminster is too far away, it is also that Edinburgh is too far away. That the answer to the problems of our communities is to represent the issues of Argyll separately to the issues of Perthshire, to the issues of the borders. They are not the same issues. One of the great weaknesses in England, in Ireland, in Wales and in Scotland is the lack of real localism. When you talk to somebody in Mouthall struggling with planning, when you talk to someone in Kelso worried about the economic development of their area, where we need to learn from France is from Mitterrand in 1983, and that is hyper-localism and mayors at a local level, not fooling the Scottish people by pretending that by transferring power from Westminster to Holyrood we're going to solve these human problems. The second thing that we need to do, and this is true of the north of England as much as Scotland, is not to pretend that London and the south of England doesn't exist. We need to accept that it exists. We need to accept that it is a challenge, that it has huge potential, and that we need to make it work for us, not pretend it isn't there. The third thing is cultural links. It is a tragedy that the educational policy of the Scottish National Party has made it more difficult for English students to study in Scottish universities and Scottish students to study in English universities. We must reinforce those cultural links. And finally, what we need is the human expression. 19th of July this year, I'm hoping that 100,000 people will gather along that old foreign Roman wall, English, Welsh, Irish, Scots, holding hands, linking arms across that border. Because in the end, what matters is not the wall that divides us, but the human ties that bind in the name of love.
Sandra Osborne.
Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman, a fellow member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I hope his wish of getting all these people in the borders fulfilled. I'll certainly be very pleased to be there on the day. Next September, we Scots take one of the most important decisions in the history of Scotland and of the UK as a whole, whether to stay in the UK or walk away to become a separate state. I think it's extremely important, and we owe it to all of the people of the UK, especially Scots, that this debate is conducted in a measured, respectful, positive manner and is informed by proper analysis rather than the name-calling that has all been too common up until now. This has been an affront to the people of Scotland and does nothing for the case of those involved in puerile bullying and infantile behaviour. No good at all. On whatever side of the argument we fall, or even for those who have yet to decide, we should go forward on the basis of what we believe is best for Scotland, and not necessarily just for the generation represented here in the chamber today, but for our children and grandchildren and those who will follow them. But that does not mean that this debate should not be robust. The fact, Mr Deputy Speaker, is, and I know you'll be well aware of this, is that Scottish people in general do not subscribe to the idea of knowing your place. And I would argue Scots have punched well above their weight as part of the UK and internationally in many different fields, and that continues today. In that regard, can I congratulate Sir Tom Hunter, not only for the success he has achieved as a new Cumnock lad, but also for what he gives back. He certainly has not forgotten where he came from, as local people will tell you. But he is also to be congratulated on his initiative to provide a forum for people to ask questions and get the answers they need to help them make this important decision for their country. Because we need answers to the difficult questions. The more that is asked about the consequences of separation, the more we get talk of shared responsibility with the rest of the UK. The best example recently being the SNP's plan for a sterling union. Leaving aside the fact that it takes two to tango, it's yet another proposal that is untangling. Once it was to be the Scots pound, then the euro, now sterling, but maybe it should be the Scots pound. As my honourable friend said, even Jim Sillars, erstwhile deputy leader of the SNP, has dismissed a currency union as stupidity on stilts. But then...
The lady for giving way entirely support with everything she's saying. I wonder if she recalls that James VI of Scotland, who became James I of the United Kingdom, of course, he called for a new currency to be called the Unite.
Well, I'm a member of Unite the Union and very proud to be so. But his Scottish history is obviously much better than mine. As I was saying, Mr Sillars is well known in Ayrshire for changing his mind because sometimes he doesn't know what party he's in and sometimes he doesn't know whether he's for devolution or separation or staying with against devolution actually in the past. The First Minister seems to be leading a campaign with the slogan, "Don't frighten the horses." Nothing really is going to change. When we do get any policy promises, like the childcare initiative outlined in the White Paper, we find that they are proposing something that could be delivered right now under the powers of devolution. Instead, in a cynical attempt to win women's votes, childcare is offered as a bribe to vote yes, while Scottish women, Mr Deputy Speaker, are not so easily fooled. We in Ayrshire have special regard for Keir Hardie as one of the great Scots of the Labour movement. Keir Hardie believed in devolution, but in the context of promoting social justice throughout the whole UK. He started the Scottish Labour Party, the British Labour Party, helped build trade unionism in Scotland and in Britain, was an internationalist in outlook, an MP for a Welsh and then an English constituency. Look at those Scots who followed in his footsteps. John Wheatley, Tom Johnson and Willie Ross, another of Ayrshire's own. They all made a tremendous contribution to Scotland, but did so from within the UK Cabinet. And that's not to mention Scottish influence within the last Labour government and indeed the present shadow Cabinet. So we have no desire to know our place in any kind of deferential sense at all, or even to be content to be a junior partner. Scots are not a subjugated people. We have been free to choose independence since universal suffrage almost 100 years ago. Rather, Scots have positively chosen, in election after election, to remain a partner in the United Kingdom, and I believe that will be their choice in the referendum vote in September.
Sir Robert Smith.
Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady and to congratulate the member for Glasgow North East for bringing forward this debate and the Backbench Committee for recognising the importance of addressing this issue. And I want to certainly take a positive approach to Scotland's place in the United Kingdom, which has been a dynamic place and one that has evolved. With 300 years of common history, we've still got our distinctive legal system, our distinctive education system, our national identity. And we've recreated our own parliament to deal with those issues that directly affect us in our lives in Scotland. So we do, as the slogan says, get the best of both worlds, a say in those decisions that affect us that are taken at the United Kingdom level, and a say in those decisions that affect us directly in Scotland in the Scottish Parliament. And in putting the positive case for voting no, I would return to what the member for Chichester said and say that one of the best and simplest ways of keeping the pound sterling is to remain part of the United Kingdom. And it's far less convoluted and far more easily achieved by voting no in the referendum. And it gives us a say in how our currency is managed, and it keeps us part of a borderless, fully internal market with a more diversified economy. As has been reminded to us, the banking crisis showed that Scotland's heavy dependency on the financial services sector, a great achievement by many people working in that sector, but also a challenge when it goes wrong. It was the rest of the United Kingdom's economy and diversification of that economy that helped to sustain us through that crisis. And similarly, with a great success story the former Secretary of State mentioned of the oil and gas industry, which is a great achievement in Scotland and a great technical achievement, and a lot of people with a lot of skills and a lot of export potential for the work they do. It is also a very unstable form of revenue to the economy because it depends on the global oil price. And when the price is high, the economy does well. When the price is low, being part of a larger economy where other parts of the economy can benefit from a low oil price gives the ability to transfer resources and sustain that. And there is also that ability within the United Kingdom with the diversified economy to come up with tax incentives to stimulate exploration, foregoing cash flow now for the benefit in the longer run. So we have also, as certainly.
The gentleman gives way. He talks about being part of a larger economy. Norway is not part of a larger economy. Is he suggesting it is not successful with its oil and gas and its general economy?
Norway is far more dominated by the oil and gas sector, and it's a successful economy. But we get the benefit that if there's a downturn in the oil price, because Scotland doesn't have the resources and reserves to take that hit in its economic achievements. And part of that United Kingdom wider diversified economy gives the chance that if there's a downturn in the oil price and when the oil eventually runs out, to still have a dynamic part of an economy across the United Kingdom. And also, as has been mentioned, access to a global network. A network of embassies and trade missions that work positively to benefit Scotland and promote Scottish trade and investment in Scotland. And that benefit is a positive benefit that we get from voting no in the referendum to maintain us part of that network. And as has been highlighted in recent speeches, the business community do not have a vote in the referendum. The referendum is for the people of Scotland to decide Scotland's future. It's one person, one vote, and it's up to the people of Scotland to make that decision. But the people of Scotland are entitled to know the concerns of business, and I think we want to reassure the voice of business that yes, they can't tell people how to vote, yes, they can't dictate the result of that referendum, but if they remain silent and then quietly implement what they would do in their concerns in the event of the result of the referendum, the people of Scotland will have voted for a future without knowing the consequences and without knowing and being able to take that on board. So it's extremely important that the business voice is have the courage to come forward and inform the debate so people can take a clear and decisive choice when it comes to that referendum. Certainly.
Giving way. Is he I don't know if he's had the subject here, but talking to some businessmen in Scotland, I have discovered that there is a feeling of nervousness on their part, that if they were to put their heads above the parapet and to express a view in favour of the Union, they might get picked on and discriminated against by the Scottish Nationalist Party.
An undercurrent of a sense of a bullying culture to the voices that come forward in this debate. But I noticed that when it comes to someone of the level of Bob Dudley, he's maybe higher up in the pecking order and less easily bullied. So I think that's an important consideration. But I hope that the fact that these voices are coming forward will make people more willing to. But obviously businesses don't want to fall out with customers, businesses don't want to fall out with their workforce, but they can put their concerns, they can put them in a way that say that it's up to you how you vote, but the consequence of voting that way is that we have this concern that the implications for our business are such that you need to take that into account. So a yes vote, there is no turning back. It's not an experiment. Message to people of Scotland that if you vote yes, it is for life, and so you need to be very confident and certain of that decision. A no vote is a positive vote for the benefits of Scotland as part of the United Kingdom, the best of both worlds, and we're better together, and I would urge people in the referendum to vote no.
Yeah, yeah. Pete Wishart.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman. And can I also congratulate the honourable member for Glasgow North East for ensuring we got this important, though all too short, debate today. Can I also just say to honourable members, I won't be taking any interventions. You're going to get 90% of the time, so I think it's only fair to the people who are actually watching this programme that they get the opportunity to hear from the other side. And I'm sure that my honourable friends...
Order.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can you confirm that next Tuesday afternoon the Scottish National Party are in control of opposition business in this House and that they have not tabled a motion to discuss independence for Scotland?
I think it's a matter that is on the record and certainly doesn't need my confirmation. Pete Wishart.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. What a chance. What an opportunity. On September the 18th of this year, we can make the choice once again to become a self-governing nation. To walk tall in the world with national self-respect and dignity like all other normal independent nations do. Being responsible for ourselves and blaming no one else for our setbacks. What's the most exciting thing for me, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that our independence will release and ignite a tsunami of energy, creativity and imagination as we get down to the business of building and creating our new independent nation. A new nation, according to our Scottish priorities, built on our sense of community. Always securing the government that we vote for, pursuing the agenda that we want. We'll run independent Scotland better than the Westminster Tories. Of course we'll run an independent Scotland better than the Westminster Tories for one key and very important fact. We care more about Scotland than the Westminster Tories do. Of course we do. And that is why we will run it better. And never again will we have a Tory government without our democratic consent. No more picking on our vulnerable, no more obscenities like the bedroom tax, no more of Labour's illegal wars, and no more Tory Labour weapons of mass destruction defiling our beautiful country. We will ease pretty seamlessly into...
Order. Can I have a little calm? In fairness, it's been a good-hearted debate so far, and I know nobody wants to spoil the harmony that this House is in. Pete Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Chairman. We will ease pretty seamlessly into a new independent status. And the day after we do secure a new nation, it'll be pretty much like the day before. But something remarkable will have happened. All of a sudden, this will be ours to shape and to determine. If things don't work out, we could change them. We could change them because we have the power. We have the power of independence. Our nation will belong to us for the first time in 300 years, and nothing could be more exciting and transformative than that. It's all down to this choice. It's all down to this choice. If you vote no, I think it's generally accepted that this is as good as it gets. This is what we have to settle for. It signals a contentment with Westminster rule and Westminster politicians' ability to deliver for Scotland. Of course I will.
And my honourable friend, no doubt, will remember, as I did, campaigning before in the first referendum on devolution in '79, where we had promised vote no and you'll get more powers. And he remembers what happened. We got absolutely nothing.
I do indeed remember that, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, because it happened in my constituency. So in Perthshire, we have long memories when it comes to these issues. If we vote no, we will be saying that we approve of Westminster government and whatever future the rest of the UK decides for us. And I don't like where the UK is going, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm not giving way. I don't like where the Westminster government is going. I don't like it a lot. And I've not got much time, so I'll mention two examples. One was last week's appalling immigration bill. A bill that will charge visitors to our country fees for healthcare and turn those who rent houses in our private right to centre into immigration officers. A nasty, pernicious, rotten bill designed to counter the threat of UKIP. We don't do UKIP in Scotland, Mr Deputy Speaker. We barely do Tory. We've got the National Treasure on the front benches, our one and only Tory members. But yet we will get this bill because this government took it through on Labour abstention. I object to my country being dragged into this monstrous race to the bottom between this government and UKIP about who could be the hardest on those who might want to come and live in my country. Scotland is better than that, Mr Deputy Speaker, yet this bill was passed. It was the same day that the House of Lords debated our country. I don't know if you saw that, Mr Deputy Speaker. That bloated, unelected chamber, stuffed full of party placemen, cronies and donors, and they had the audacity to tell our nation what they should do. And then they also had the affront to defile the memory of our war dead and insult the many brave veterans who have served this country with distinction just because they happen to support independence for our nation. One thing that we will get with independence, Mr Deputy Speaker, we will wipe away that ermine-wearing, unelected chamber from the face of Scottish public life, and our nation will be much better for that again. We believe Scotland is so much better than that, Mr Deputy Speaker. We know that if we gain control of our own resources and secure all the necessary powers, there is nothing from stopping us from becoming an economic powerhouse. And that's what we look forward to. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
The honourable member is putting an emotional case for independence, but he's also not taking on board the wise words of the Governor of the Bank of England about the illusion of independence if you keep the pound sterling in an independent Scotland, because you'll be taking away the voice of Scotland from the decisions that will affect its very core monetary policy.
We've had enough of that. You can't do that stuff, so thank you for the honourable gentleman. We will have this decision to come for us. And it's a choice over negativity and positivity. And they will lose, Mr.
I want to hear the honourable gentleman. It's not fair that you're enjoying yourself. I want to hear the speech. Pete Wishart.
We've listened to their speeches with as much respect as possible, and we're shouted down a minute. And it's just this impossibility to listen to the other side of the debate, and I don't know why this place thinks that's an attractive proposition for this. So it's a choice between negativity and positivity. No European country has done what we're about to do, and as an exercise in democracy, this is huge. This is Scotland's great choice, because it's a choice of two very different and distinct futures. We can decide if this is as good as it gets, or we can decide to do something much better, to take control of ourselves, to put the nation in the hands of the Scottish people. I know, Mr Deputy Speaker, when we get this chance, probably this one-in-a-generation chance to do this, we will vote for the positive, because positive beats negative. And what a prize, Mr Deputy Speaker, when we vote yes in overwhelming numbers in the course of this debate, when we go to the polls in September, we will vote yes. What a prize, a country of our own.
Ian Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm very honoured to have this opportunity to contribute to this important debate, and I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Glasgow North East in securing the discussion today. Like the Honourable Gentleman from Perth and North Perthshire, I want to make principally an emotional argument. The 18th of September is my birthday. And I want to celebrate the 18th of September for hopefully many years to come, probably with a glass or two of a good single malt, celebrating my country. I don't want it to be a permanent reminder of the day that my country was lost, because my nationality is British. My country is the United Kingdom, and I want to speak up for my constituents and everyone on both sides of the border who feel the same way. I have a great affection for the Honourable Gentleman, so I'll give way.
Resisted, but what sort of birthday present do you think the people of Scotland would like to give a Tory MP on the 18th of September?
Well, there are some very, very good distilleries, and I have a taste for the water of life, so I'd be very happy to send him a list, and perhaps he can buy me one on the day. We have over 300 years of a forged special identity. That does not diminish the importance of the history or culture of the constituent parts of the United Kingdom. But it is like, initially, a marriage, where you have two separate families coming together. But over the centuries, those two families forged something unique together. Through the generations, a shared identity comes about. And whether that is through triumph or disaster, adversity or opportunity, something special is created. And I think we dismantle that at our peril. The second point I wish to make is what I see as a fundamental flaw at the heart of the SNP's position. It is not a proposal I agree with, but there is a logical coherence to the argument that Scotland, as a separate nation, should become independent, be master of its own destiny, shape its own future, as the Honourable Gentleman from Perth set out. Now, quite apart from the huge emotional costs, I believe, that would be paid to have that, there are many uncertainties and other costs that would flow. But I understand the appeal, the emotional appeal, and the logic that goes behind it. But what is not logical is to go through all that pain, all that cost, all that uncertainty, only to argue that this new, separate, independent, sovereign country, nothing would change. The Honourable Gentleman admitted it himself. The day after, it would be the same. Why go through all that, particularly on the point of currency union, which has been the subject of much discussion? Now, I don't often agree with Jim Sillars, former member of this House and former deputy leader of the SNP and one-time ally, no doubt, of the member for Perth and North Perthshire. But his article in the Sunday Times last weekend was spot on when he wrote, "A currency per se is a badge of sovereignty printed by a sovereign government, and that will be the badge of the United Kingdom." And went on to argue, you don't pool sovereignty, you transfer it and lose it. And that is what would happen with a separate Scotland under the SNP's argument. Now, should independence happen, Scotland, England, the rest of the United Kingdom would survive. I don't subscribe to the theory that would be reduced to some economic wasteland, but I believe that we would all be poorer. Time does not permit me to go into all the arguments on the practicalities, but the strength of the Union is greater than the sum of its parts. If we split up, we are all diminished.
Would the Honourable Gentleman give way?
Certainly.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman, and I thank Mr Deputy Speaker for allowing me to speak, but can I point out the influence of Scotland is enormous. There are 3 Stuarts
on this side. There's a Douglas behind me. Scotland has huge influence in the United Kingdom and should remain with the United Kingdom.
My fellow clansman puts the point eloquently. Scotland punches above her weight in the United Kingdom. England punches above her weight by being part of the United Kingdom. Be it in international affairs, defence, economic clout, we are stronger together. Now, devolution is a dynamic process. I think that was always the intention when the initial Scotland Act was passed. And in 2012, we passed a further Scotland Act, which contains within it a substantial transfer of powers, principally fiscal powers, from this place to Holyrood. It is a transfer that contains huge implications, particularly for businesses in Scotland, as they adjust to the new fiscal arrangements. I support that. It makes Holyrood responsible for more of the money it spends. That is a point that finds much welcome in my constituency in England, as I know it does in Scotland. But surely the sensible way is to let that major change happen, to bed down, and then we can see if there are further practical changes that can be introduced, so we have the optimal arrangement between Scotland, England and the rest of the United Kingdom. But do not take the gamble, the one-way ticket to uncertainty that a yes vote on the 18th of September would represent. Now, I want to conclude by returning to my principal point. Whatever the economic arguments, the strategic arguments, the practical arguments about Scotland remaining part of the United Kingdom, for me, the principal point is an emotional one. This is my country.
Yes.
I will not rest until we see a no vote on the 18th of September. I don't want to swap my country for having some dual citizenship or whatever other arrangements would come about. I'm British. I want to stay British. And I will fight with every fibre in my body to keep us British.
Michael McCann.
Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow such a thoughtful contribution and an emotional contribution from that honourable gentleman. I want to speak about the reasons why Scotland is stronger when we pool and share our resources as a United Kingdom. But let me start by outlining what I believe are the three main elements of the debate in the streets of Scotland. First, it's about the things that we know will change. The second is the things that wouldn't change. And the third are the issues that would require a negotiation. And what has become apparent is that there is a nationalist plan to move as many items as possible from the negotiation box into the box of things that wouldn't change. The pound, membership of the European Union and membership of NATO, to name just three. And it's pretty clear that the motivation for that move is to create an atmosphere where the people of Scotland feel that separation isn't a risk. I hope that the Yes campaign changes their strategy and tactics, because a victory based on a deceit will be no victory at all. We also know that many people have stepped into the issue to make their views known, most notably recently the Governor of the Bank of England. I hope that people continue to do so without fear and make positive contributions to the argument on both sides. But I must place on record my concern that the apparatus of the state, Mr Deputy Speaker, has been abused by those in power. The White Paper, which I have here, you'll be delighted to know this isn't my speech. The White Paper was billed as a document that would answer all the questions on independence, and it doesn't. Sir Peter Housden, the Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Government, must explain why taxpayers' money was used to create and issue this document. And the Secretary of State, the Cabinet Office and the Head of the Civil Service should explain why they've maintained their silence while the impartiality of the Civil Service has been compromised. And let me give you just two examples. On page 37 it states, the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government in Edinburgh are responsible for a range of devolved matters, and it goes on to list them. Then it says, the Westminster Government, currently a coalition of Conservative and Liberal Democratic parties, and the Westminster Parliament have reserved rights, and then it goes on to name those rights. What do you take from those two statements, Mr Deputy Speaker. It doesn't mention the United Kingdom Parliament, and it refers to a Westminster Parliament and a Westminster Government that do not exist. It's factually incorrect. So why did civil servants allow this document to be released and be published at the taxpayers' expense? And, Mr Deputy Speaker, it doesn't end there. Each page is filled with similar partisan comments which belies the Scottish Government's position that this document was determined or designed to illuminate. And there is one example that really makes my blood boil, and the honourable member behind me mentioned it a few moments ago. On page 3, it states, under gains from independence, abolition of the bedroom tax, which will save 82,500 households in Scotland, including 63,500 households with a disabled adult and 15,500 households with children, an average of £50 per month. What can be more despicable? What can be more despicable, Mr Deputy Speaker, and reprehensible about people preying on the fears and the concerns of the most vulnerable and the people in Scotland? That statement and SNP ministers' words on the issue were designed to create the impression that the Scottish Parliament could not remove the council tax without independence. And this week, by their own actions, they have confirmed that it's a deceit. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I think my honourable friend is making a very, very powerful speech, not just dissecting the White Paper for what it is, an act of fiction, but also saying that the powers that the Scottish Government currently have can be used. Do you think the people of Scotland will be asking very, very seriously questions of the SNP Government while they've waited over 12 months to abolish the bedroom tax in Scotland?
I absolutely agree with that statement from the honourable gentleman, and there's many, many more examples. Each page of that document is filled with similar deceit, and it's not fair that the people of Scotland, when they should be relying on informative documents from the Scottish Government to inform the decision that they will have to take on the 18th of September. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, Scotland is part of the most successful political and economic union that the world has ever seen, mentioned by other honourable members. If people vote no...
I'm grateful for the member for giving way. It's also the case, isn't it, that the UK hasn't been invaded by a foreign body for over 750 years. Surely that in itself demonstrates just how successful the Union has been.
That was before the Union.
I'll defer to the honourable gentleman in the amount of time, given that he was probably there for most of it. But I think he is absolutely correct. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, if people vote no in the referendum, they can wake up. They can wake up on the 19th of September knowing that they will keep the pound, knowing that we will remain members of NATO through the United Kingdom, knowing that we will retain our European Union membership, and they'll know that brave men and women, a lot of them Scots, are looking after our national security and much, much more. They'll know that these are not matters that will be subject to a negotiation. But there's one other crucial thing. The United Kingdom is successful because we pool and share our resources. Money earned in more prosperous parts of the United Kingdom can be shared with areas that have less resources, and history tells us areas of wealth are not always fixed. But the size, depth and sheer diversity of the United Kingdom means that we'll always have the sources of wealth for redistribution, even when certain natural resources cease to exist. And that our ability to pool and share our resources, coupled with the certainty of currency and international agreements which we're party to, insulates us as a United Kingdom in ways which smaller nations cannot possibly compete with. But there is a human element too, Mr Deputy Speaker. I was a trade union official elected in full time for 26 years of my career, and I've worked with colleagues and friends across the whole of the United Kingdom. Walking down a street in London, Darlington, Cardiff or Belfast is, apart from the accent, no different from walking down the streets of Glasgow, because people have got the same problems. We share much more than currency and membership of international agreements. We share a history, and we share the same hopes and aspirations for future generations. Last night, Mr Deputy Speaker, there was an addition to the McCann family. My niece Maria had an £8 4-ounce baby boy in Wishaw General Hospital. You'll be delighted to know that mother and child are doing well. I hope that that child gets the same chance to grow up in the United Kingdom as I have.
Sir Gerald Howard.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I am delighted to follow the powerful contribution made by the Honourable Member for East Kilbride, Strathaven and Les Mahago, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole House when I say congratulations to him on the addition to his family. Much of this debate, Mr Deputy Speaker, has been about the forthcoming referendum is centred on the economic issues, which are a bit clinical. But Bob Dudley's warning that BP would question future investment in a foreign country called Scotland will surely not be the last such intervention. The Business Secretary's statement that the Royal Bank of Scotland would move its headquarters to the place where it is regulated will doubtless be followed by others. And the Governor of the Bank of England has warned of the consequences of secession. It would not be in Alex Salmond's gift to decide whether an independent Scotland could keep the pound, but that case has been very strongly made brilliantly by my honourable friend for Chichester, so I will not repeat it. Defence, of course, is another critical area. 12,600 people are employed in the defence industry in Scotland, many in the Clyde shipyards and in Rosyth, where the largest warships ever built in this kingdom are currently being assembled, the Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers. Under Article 346 of the European Treaty, the British government is not required to put out to tender across the EU any contract for defence equipment. In a separate Scotland, all that will be lost. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I'm sure he's aware that since the Second World War, the MOD has never placed a contract for any defence ship anywhere or other in the UK. And if Scotland is no longer part of the UK, obviously they won't get those contracts.
The honourable member is absolutely right, and it's terribly important that the people of Scotland understand the significance of defence in this debate, and I'm grateful to him for his contribution. And furthermore, there is also the strategic risk to the rest of the United Kingdom if the defence of our northern borders were to be entrusted to a foreign country, not to mention the ludicrous situation regarding the United Kingdom's critical nuclear deterrent, which would have to be removed from Scotland at massive expense and huge danger to the whole of the current United Kingdom. But these are all matters of the head, Mr Deputy Speaker. Like my honourable friend for Penrith and the border, I want to address matters of the heart. My father was born in Lancashire, but my mother was a Douglas, the daughter of a Scottish border farmer, himself a border reaver. I am a product of the Union, and I am intensely proud of it, and I do care about Scotland, even though I don't have a Scottish accent. My closest relatives have farmed that magnificent rolling border country for centuries, and are doing so today as we debate this issue. My uncles, together with MOD representatives from the Northumberland side, defined the border between England and Scotland along the Cheviot in the 1950s. My uncle played flanker for Hawick. Two of my cousins played for Jed Forest. My second cousin, the late W.I.D. Elliott, hailed by the Daily Telegraph as the greatest post-war Scottish rugby player, 29 caps for Scotland. This is no foreign country. This is where a large part of my soul resides. When I cross the border back into Scotland, I think of the words of Sir Walter Scott. Breathes there the man with soul so dead, who never to himself hath said, "This is my own, my native land. I trace my roots to nowhere else but the soil of this kingdom, this United Kingdom, and the Scottish borders is where half my soul resides." So let us be in no doubt, Mr Deputy Speaker, as the noble Baroness Liddell said during an excellent debate led by my noble friend, the Lord Lang of Moncton, in another place last week, sadly not properly covered, of course, by our newspapers, the SNP has filed for divorce. They want to end 300 years of a mighty and successful partnership, a partnership to which Scotland has contributed a huge amount. The market economist Adam Smith, Alexander Graham Bell, who gave us the telephone, John Logie Baird, inventor of the television, Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin, James Wilson from Hawick, who founded the bank for which I worked, Standard Chartered Bank, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, who famously commanded RAF Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain, all Scots who had enriched this kingdom. And today, Sir Alex Ferguson, possibly the greatest football manager of all time, J.K. Rowling, Sir Chris Hoy, Andy Murray and the rest. that one man's personal vanity should drive the campaign to put asunder that which has endured for centuries amounts to constitutional vandalism. We've worked together, we've played together, and we have fought for freedom together. And my uncles fought in the Second World War to retain the freedoms of these islands. If this divorce were to happen, Scotland's influence would be virtually zero. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Does he agree with me that the unsettling and unnerving effect that a division in this wonderful union would have, that it would get the tails up of Irish Republicans in my part of the kingdom and would drive another wedge into the hearts and souls of people in Ulster?
Of course, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to make that analogy and to point to the consequences, the unforeseen consequences to which the Scottish National Party does not wish to draw attention. So I entirely support him. In this divorce court, of course, the judges will be those of whatever nationality currently reside in Scotland. The 800,000 Scots living in England have been disenfranchised and can only watch helplessly as others determine the fate of the land of their birth. People like Captain Eric Winkle Brown, Royal Navy, who has flown more aircraft types than anyone else on this planet, who has done more ship deck landings than anyone else, 2,500, who interrogated Hermann Goering in German after the war. Brought up in the borders, in Melrose, Eric, who helped save us from Nazi domination, will have no vote because he does not currently reside in Scotland. Nor will those Scots living and working overseas contributing to the prosperity of this, our kingdom. And are we then all to have separate passports? Are I and my family on the other side of the border, are we to have separate passports? Are we to be divided in this way? I think this is monstrous. So to those in Scotland, whether born there or of other nationality, to you has been granted the exclusive privilege of deciding the destiny of this, our United Kingdom. I say please vote to retain the unity of the kingdom in which Scotland plays such a proud and distinguished part. It would be a tragedy if families across the kingdom were to be divided in the way the separatists are demanding.
Morris.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I add my own congratulations to my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow North East, for securing this important debate on Scotland's place in the United Kingdom. Mr Deputy Speaker, one way or another, 2014 will be a year that Scots will remember. In 7 months' time, the Scottish people will vote to decide either to continue 300 years of partnership and shared prosperity or to go it alone as a separate state. Unlike some, I did not get into politics to obsess over the Constitution. I'd rather be talking about how to build a better Scotland, a better Britain and a better world. And I'm just as appalled by poverty in Birmingham, Liverpool and West Ham as I am in Broxburn, Livingston and West Calder in my own constituency. And I would rather the Scottish Government was focused on its day job of improving the lives of ordinary Scots than on abusing public resources to promote an SNP agenda. Mr Deputy Speaker, by pulling and sharing our resources, Scots have contributed to one of the most successful and prosperous political unions the world has ever seen. But whereas there is little doubt that Scotland could be an independent country, the question the Scottish people will have to consider is whether Scotland will be better off by going it alone. My view is that Scotland would not, and there is a range of positive reasons why I believe that we are all better together. Scotland is linked intrinsically to the rest of the United Kingdom, socially, politically and economically. I will certainly give way.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman, and I think it is important to make the point that Scotland is linked to not just England but Wales and Northern Ireland, and there are strong bonds right across all those countries. And it's important that we, from those areas, send out a very strong message to our Scottish fellow citizens that we want them to remain part of the United Kingdom. We cherish their part in the United Kingdom, and it's important that while not interfering in the democratic vote, that we send that positive message out.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I certainly welcome that intervention, and I recognise what he's saying. I fully understand and accept the major cultural links, if nothing else, between the people of Scotland and the people of Northern Ireland. Indeed, I have many friends and indeed relatives who emanate from Northern Ireland. Mr Deputy Speaker, I was going on to say the single market within the UK affords significant economic, trade and employment opportunities to people on both sides of the border, and our membership of the European Union through the United Kingdom provides a vast marketplace for Scottish exporters. Together we have a place at the top table of the European Council of Ministers, we are one of the G8 Forum of the world's largest economies, and we are our permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, all of which allows us to wield unprecedented influence on the European and global stages. As a member of NATO, we have collectively benefited since the war from international security and defence cooperation on a grand scale. When it comes to the economy, Scotland has a very important relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom. Scotland benefits from access to a market comprising tens of millions of people within a single jurisdiction. Scots are employed by firms based in the rest of the UK, and the people in the rest of the UK benefit from employment opportunities with Scottish-based companies. Indeed, Scotland's exports to the rest of the UK are worth double its exports to the rest of the world. I will certainly give way to my honourable friend.
Does my honourable friend agree with me that upon independence that the border would become a barrier for business with the rest of the UK?
I'm grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, to my honourable friend. Of course, on day one of independence, if Scots were indeed to vote for that, the rest of the United Kingdom would remain within the European Union, and of course Scotland would not. So Scotland would clearly not benefit from the single market of the European Union. So that would be a great detriment to Scottish business and to Scotland overall. Mr Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, welcome to the chair, and it's great to see a Scot in the chair this afternoon. And a woman, I'm reminded by my honourable friend from East Lothian. Madam Deputy Speaker, in addition to the shared opportunities, the pooling of resources across the UK allows risk as well as reward to be spread, as seen most notably in the bailout of the Scottish-based banks during the financial crisis, when the UK, led by our Scots, injected an amount of capital into the banks well in excess of the total budget of the Scottish Government. The pooling of resources also allows for distribution on the basis of social need across the welfare state. If Scotland was with the UK, that would place a major question mark over its ability to continue to fund benefits at current levels and to meet state and public sector pension commitments. And of course, Scotland has its own devolved Scottish Parliament, with significantly more powers to come as a result of the Calman Commission and the Scotland Act passed last year. Therefore, it can be argued that Scotland has the best of both worlds: local decision-making, but under the financial umbrella of the UK Barnett formula, giving Scots more funding per capita than anywhere else in the UK.
Honourable friend, give way. Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for making a very positive case? Can my honourable friend remind the House why the Barnett formula was introduced and why the additional funding per capita goes to Scots in a small country relatively?
Well, I think Scotland disproportionately benefits from the Barnett formula, I think to the tune of £1,400 per capita, because of the rurality, super-sparsity and then the particular needs of Scotland. So his point is well made. Madam Deputy Speaker, since 2011 we have been told that the answer to every question the Scottish people have ever asked about independence would be in the Scottish Government's White Paper. And given Alex Salmond's recent statements, I was half expecting next week's lottery numbers to appear in its pages too. The Scottish people were promised a new testament. Instead, we have had to settle for the SNP's next election manifesto. The truth is, Alex Salmond simply cannot guarantee many of the White Paper promises and has completely failed to answer many of the legitimate questions that have been asked of the Yes campaign. Yet the Scottish Government could deliver more with the powers it already has, but chooses partisan dividing lines rather than improving the lives of the Scottish people. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the 18th of September, the Scottish people will have a choice either to support the continuation of Scotland within the UK and all the advantages and benefits that that involves, with a further strengthening of devolution, or take a leap into the unknown, never to return.
Here. John Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to speak in this debate, to speak not just as a Member of Parliament in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, but to speak as a Member of Parliament for Carlisle, the city at the very centre of the United Kingdom, a city which is also situated on the English-Scottish border, and of course to speak as a Scot. Scotland is one part of the United Kingdom, and that United Kingdom, of which Scotland is a part, has been hugely successful for over the last 300 years. Indeed, I would suggest that yes, we live in a union which has a number of different parts to it, but that the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. That the United Kingdom as one nation is far superior and far more successful than two or more separate entities. That is why it is in the interests of all of us that we remain part of a United Kingdom. We live in a nation which has been and is hugely successful. It is successful economically, socially and politically. We all live in a wealthy, prosperous and stable country, a country that respects the individual and upholds the rule of law. We live in a country with a comprehensive education system, a health services which is free at the point of use, and a standard of living the envy of much of the world. Scotland is a part of that. Indeed, Scotland has made a very valuable contribution to the very success of the United Kingdom. It has helped create that prosperity which we all enjoy, and it continues to do so. But in under 8 months' time, this most successful of unions could start to fracture and come apart. It is my view, a view shared by many in this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this move to an independent country would not be in the interests of Scotland or the people of Scotland. In fact, it would, I believe, also be detrimental to the remaining parts of the United Kingdom, and if I may be more parochial, it would be against the best interests of the people of my constituency and the surrounding area, both north and south of the border. On a recent programme, a commentator suggested that debate on independence was one between the accountants and the poets. It is the hearts and minds argument. I do not subscribe to the argument that it is one or the other, that it is a debate between those only concerned about the financial and economic implications against those who believe in a more romantic attraction to the idea of independence. Scotland's continuing place within the United Kingdom can be supported on both emotional arguments and sentiment, as well as on hard economic facts. The Union has to be to the economic benefit of the Scottish people. The real danger for Scotland is that independence will lead to significant economic stagnation and decline. Without the Union, Scotland may not be as attractive a place for some sectors and industries to invest or do business. Talent may leave, businesses may leave. Remember, the 1707 Union was as much about economics as it was about politics. Businesses do not like uncertainty. There is a clear certainty and continuity if Scotland remains a part of the United Kingdom. Businesses and investors know exactly where they stand if Scotland remains part of the United Kingdom. They know and understand the regulatory regime, the laws and the relationships. In contrast, there is massive uncertainty if Scotland decides to pursue an independent course. I appreciate that other honourable members will have and touched upon many of the business and economic issues. The currency, the euro, sterling, or the Scottish dollar, membership of the EU, immigration, tax regulation, particularly of the financial sector. As for the emotional debate, I see nothing wrong with people being proud of their roots, proud to say they are Scottish as well as British, in exactly the same way that someone can call themselves Welsh, Irish, a Yorkshireman, a Brummie or much else. They are still British, but they can and should be proud of both. Indeed, the Olympic Games demonstrate the unifying attachment that most people have to the United Kingdom. We should not forget that the debate in Scotland's place in the United Kingdom does have important issues for the places such as Carlisle. There's a lot of work, leisure, social shopping and family relationships that cross the border. Therefore, there is a danger we end up with unnecessary complications and difficulties which could hinder activity, particularly economic and business. Different currencies, health and safety, environmental issues, alternative immigration policies, and indeed daylight hours could be different. In an extreme case, we could end up with somebody travelling across the border in either direction who needs to carry ID, change their money, alter their watches, follow different regulations, pay different taxes, and wonder if it was all worthwhile. I conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, that speaking as an MP for Carlisle, a Scot and a UK citizen, I believe that Scotland's place in the UK is very much like Carlisle's. It should be at its centre.
Angus Brendan McNeill.
Tablet, Madam Deputy Speaker. She urim vora hal go Jew, vi fein corum, bring the law is alapa Ishmalach. And I would just like to start in Gaelic, the oldest language of these islands of Britain and Ireland, to say that it's a great pleasure to speak in this debate today about the day Scotland will be independent. It is tremendous this House has taken the opportunity to debate this vital topic of how Scotland can join the world as an independent nation, to be a full part of the United Nations, a full and proper member of the Commonwealth, not kept apart, kept separate as a region of another state. Certainly not knowing its place in the Union. If ever a debate had the title and hangover of imperialism, it's this: Scotland's place, like New Zealand, Canada, Norway, Denmark and Ireland, is in the world. No country in the developed world has voted against their independence, and I'm sure Scotland will not be the first. It's an odd insult to Scotland that we have here in Westminster that every other nation is independent, but Scotland is insulted by the word separate or separatism. We will be independent like the others too. The member for Edinburgh South, Alistair Darling, at South West, the Darling leader of the No campaign, often says independence is a one-way street. He darkly warns, in fact. Well, in fairness, there's not much he says with any brightness and joy, but he is describing a situation and not a fact. The fact is, it's probably reversible, but the empirical reality from observation is that none who have gained their independence choose to give it up. And as it works personally when we stop being children and make decisions for ourselves, so it works for countries. The best people to make decisions for a country are simply the people who live and work there, and this is true for Scotland. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way. He's made a very interesting point. Would he commit his party, if, heaven forfend, there is a yes vote on the 18th of September, that at some subsequent date he would give a further referendum to allow Scotland to go back into the United Kingdom?
No, I won't, but others are free to campaign for that if they so choose, and if they win a mandate, they can do that. To my English friends who worry about the absence of Scotland, that we have a permanent Tory government in the rump UK, well, the facts are that Scotland has only changed the government of the UK for 6 months since 1945, whereas the Scottish nation in this tawdry political union of 1707 has got the government it has not voted for 2/3 of the time. I'll happily give way.
Would the honourable friend remember that all the claims that were made for devolution by the Tory party, that it would lead to forever Labour being in power in Scotland, and how short a period that turned out to be?
Yes, well, my friend makes a great point, and Labour are out of power in Scotland, and like the Liberals and the Tories are heading downwards and downwards. Scotland does not affect the government of Westminster 98% of the time, as I've said. However, regardless, the first job surely as a representative of the Scottish people is that we have to make the lives of those who live in Scotland better. The concern of who is in government in London, Paris, Madrid, Berlin or Dublin should not be the guiding light of any Scots Democrat. It should be the conditions of the people in the housing estates of Easterhouse, Castlemilk, Sighthill, the Ratloch, bettering our cities. My time is limited. Improving lives in Lochaber, better quality jobs in Sutherland, more young people staying in Lewis, and a flourishing Skye. No more neglect. This should be our concern, not the Red Tories or the Blue Tory government in London, but the needs of the people of Scotland, the democratic will of the people in Scotland, regardless where in the world they are from. Our immigrants are very welcome in Scotland, as the member for Perth and North Perthshire has often said. Scotland's destiny is in those people's hands, and only a yes vote, Madam Deputy Speaker, keeps that destiny in the hands of the people who are in Scotland. We are at a crossroads in Scotland. Do we have the courage to deliver a better future to succeeding generations than the Norwegians had? Dirt poor when they made the decision in 1906, without the manifest advantages of Scotland today. Now they have an oil fund for future generations, so that when the oil runs out, the money won't. The value is such that all Norwegians on paper are kroner millionaires. The finances of Scotland are good, despite having a tax system not designed to optimise or maximise Scotland's potential. But in each and every one of the last 32 years, estimates show that Scotland has contributed more tax per person than the UK as a whole. Figures for Scotland are equivalent to £10,700 of tax per head annually, while the UK as a whole has only £9,000. From 2007 to 2008, public spending has been a lower share of Scotland's GDP than the UK as a whole. Taking tax and spend together over the last 5 years, public finances in Scotland have been better than the UK as a whole by £12.6 billion. Time does not allow. Only this week, the Financial Times backs this with the immortal lines. And the members should listen rather than barrack. They should have the courtesy to listen. And they should listen to this. An independent Scotland could expect...
Order! The House must listen to the honourable gentleman. Angus Brennan McNeill.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I hope members feel suitably chastised on Labour benches. They should listen to this. An independent Scotland could expect to start with healthier state finances than the rest of the UK. Even without oil and gas, GDP is higher than Italy and equal to France. But why we should say without oil and gas, I don't know. We don't mention that when we come to Norway or Saudi Arabia. Financially and economically, Scotland can do it. In fact, it has been said that it would be wrong to suggest Scotland could be another such successful independent country. Anybody on the opposite side wish to tell me who said that? Who could disagree with those words? It's from the Prime Minister, David Cameron, or indeed from Ruth Davidson. Yes, I see the blank looks on the Tory benches. You can Google her later. You'll find out who she is. The question is whether or not Scotland can survive as a separate nation. Of course it could. Notice she uses separate. Or my favourite, my real favourite, knowing the economic case has been won by the yes side. Our argument has never been that Scotland couldn't be independent, and that was the Tories' darling in Scotland, the Labour MP for Edinburgh South West. Our message is one of hope, Madam Deputy Speaker. Where parents in the UK pay the highest childcare in Europe, Scottish parents have an average of 27% of household income on childcare. The OECD average is 12%. When independent and we get the taxes properly organised, that childcare will bring the economy. We in Scotland will dramatically improve childcare. But we need the powers, and we can't have financial leakage of fiscal benefits to Westminster who choose not to fund this. It happens in Sweden, and it will happen in Scotland. Independence must happen. We can't have families looking at £9,000 tuition fees for every child going to university, costing every family £36,000 per child, or a family of three paying a staggering £108,000. This is the cost of voting no. Because voting no to independent risks our budget. It risks 100,000 more children in poverty, Scotland out of the EU against their will, no guarantee of more powers for the Parliament, no guarantee of getting the government we vote for. Therefore, Scotland must be independent. And we know we can use the pound sterling. The Daily Telegraph blew the gaff. They said the new nation will be able to keep the pound, or else we will renounce the debt. Therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are not subsidy junkies. We keep the pound, and the rest of the world looks at us, the independence generations, the envious in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, because we will deliver independence.
John Thurso.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What a considerable pleasure it is to follow the honourable gentleman, the member for Neilly na na. Rarely can such a speech with such a terrible lack of fact have graced this hallowed chamber. What a load of perfectly emotional claptrap. Do sit down, dear boy. Madam Deputy Speaker, it had been my intention originally, when I put my name down to speak, to stick to what Governor Carney, in his address in Edinburgh, called the dismal science, and to confine myself to the facts as they've been exposed on the Treasury Select Committee. But alas, the Treasury Select Committee chairman was the first to be called and did a job far better than I could. And I was struck listening to the words of the honourable gentleman, the member for Penrith and the Borders, which I thought was an extraordinarily good and trenchant speech, by the fact that we should not run away from the emotion that's involved in this decision. So I would like just first to touch a little bit on the heart issues before I return to the fact issues. I had the honour of addressing a group of Girl Guides in Thurso not very long ago, who had asked me to come and explain the consequences of, or the independence, or the potential for Scotland in independence. And I felt it was very important to try and give as balanced a view as I could, and to explain both sides of the argument before giving my conclusion as to why I preferred to stay in the Union. But I started by doing just a little bit of history, as the honourable gentleman for Penrith did. I didn't quite go back to the Romans, but I did point out that it was not until, I think it was 1468, but certainly about that part of the 15th century, that the Northern Isles came into the Scotland we now know. So actually, the administrative construct of modern Scotland existed for less time than the Union has existed. And I think it is important to put that in context, because so often we are given this wonderful diet that somehow the great Gaeldom has gone back for millennia to some distant point in history, and that if we don't give Scotland its independence, we will be denying it those millennia of destiny. The plain fact is that that's just a load of emotional tosh. And if we should set it to one side and actually understand the true history, which was, if you go back a little bit further to the Battle of Largs, at that point, up to that point, Caithness, and most people in Caithness, actually owed allegiance to the Norse side of things, to the King of Norway, through the Earl of Orkney, one of my ancestors. And I have to say that were Scotland to find itself in the impossible position of being independent, I think that I shall be joining my good friends from the Northern Isles in seeking independence and going back to that earldom. But what I really want to say is we need to assess the risks, and we need to assess the risks as well as the benefits. And I hope the debate will be calm and rational. When I first joined the Select Committee, Treasury Select Committee, we were looking at globalisation. And actually, you have to look at globalisation to see what is happening in business. So when we talk of what might happen to business, we do have to look at where best would companies be regulated. And the financial services industry in Scotland may well think it is better off regulated in a different jurisdiction. We do have to think about companies who have treaties with other sovereign nations and may not continue to build things in Scotland when it becomes a separate country. And we do have to think about people who wish to invest in the United Kingdom. Will they go to the rest of the United Kingdom, or will they in fact go to Scotland? And I suggest that for many of them the simple practical commercial decision would be to go to the rest. And therefore, in looking at the risks and the benefits, I have to say that the benefits cannot be marginal, nor can they be uncertain. If Scotland is to seek independence, those benefits must be substantial and proven, and that case has not yet been made. Now, we are a brave heart nation. It's a great Scottish characteristic, but there's another great Scottish characteristic, and it's the canny heed. And at the moment, it's the time for canny heeds. Otherwise, my grandchildren will be reading the headline in one of the Scottish newspapers, "Will the last person leaving Scotland snuff out the candle?"
Gemma Doyle.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to contribute to the debate today. The first priority of any responsible government is, of course, the security of its people, and I want to say a few words about that this afternoon. As part of the UK, Scots have a high level of security in a very dangerous world, and service personnel from Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland work together in our armed forces to keep us safe at home and to tackle threats around the world. And people like the security that the UK Armed Forces provide. And this is reflected in some of the findings of the recent Scottish Social Attitudes Survey, because only 27% believe that if Scotland does become independent, she should have her own army, navy and air force. While 67% believe that if Scotland goes independent, we should still combine our armed forces with the rest of the UK. And there are very few issues in that survey which give such a clear, overwhelming majority for one answer in favour over the other, apart from, of course, the overwhelming support of people wanting to keep the pound, whatever happens. And certainly the views of Scots are not as clear-cut on the issue of the nuclear deterrent as they are on this issue of what should happen to our armed forces. And within the UK, of course, we are also a part of NATO, and our NATO membership is vitally important. It means that we work with other countries to benefit from full-spectrum defence capabilities. It means that we are not out on our own and we have influence in the world. But the SNP having dragged their party to reverse their long-standing opposition to NATO membership, actually are still in a real muddle on this issue. Because they say that they would only join NATO, they would only want to join NATO if they were given a guarantee that no nuclear submarines would pass through Scotland's waters. However, in the White Paper, they say both this, but also that they would operate a don't ask, don't tell policy. Now, both of these cannot be true. Either they would only join NATO, or they would apply to join NATO on the basis of that condition that I outlined, or they would drop it and they would be happy to join and operate, as they say, a don't ask, don't tell policy. So our membership of NATO, if we were independent, is entirely unclear whether or not we would be a member and on what basis the SNP would like to take us into NATO on. And of course, no such guarantee we would expect to be given. Now, the defence budget put forward in the White Paper is £2.5 billion a year, and that's just 7% of the current total UK budget, every penny of which is spent protecting Scottish families along with those across the rest of the UK. And there is an annual defence budget, but no mention of any start-up costs, and not a single procurement pledge in the entirety of that White Paper. And the UK's defence structure cannot be easily disaggregated. Assets and troops are based throughout the UK and in the rest of the world, and they are for the defence and security of everyone who lives here. Scotland receives the full benefits of the protection and security afforded to the rest of the UK. I'm afraid, I don't have very much time. And we pool our resources and work together to keep the people of the UK safe. Why would we want to give this up? Now, there is what I would call a yellow thread of assumption that runs through the White Paper. The assumptions are that the remainder of the UK would cheerfully hand over whatever equipment an independent Scotland asked for. But what if the remainder of the UK said, I think actually we'll keep our frigates and we'll keep our typhoons? What would an independent Scotland do then? We are talking about equipment that cannot be bought off the shelf unless you buy second-hand, and perhaps that is, of course, the backup plan. Now, the UK, of course, the defence industry sustains thousands of jobs in Scotland, from those who serve on the front line to those working in industry. Our shipyards, as has been already outlined, get special preference when it comes to the awarding of contracts. The UK does not build complex warships in other countries, and the GMB convener in Scotstoun has described the SNP's defence plans as complete fantasy, which would lead to yard closures. I think that we pool our resources and we share the risk, and our defence is much better within the UK.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady for West Dunbartonshire. I'm speaking today both as a representative of my constituents in Stafford and as a proud citizen of the United Kingdom who, as my honourable friend from Penrith and the Borders so eloquently said, cares deeply, indeed loves, the kingdom and its constituent nations of Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Together with the vast majority of my constituents, if a poll we took at a recent meeting and many conversations with them are anything to go by, I wish and they wish Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom. There is somehow the notion around that people in the rest of the UK are not concerned about this decision, and that certainly does not accord with my experience. They do care. It's just that, quite rightly, they respect the right of the Scottish people to make up their own minds in this most important decision. As a United Kingdom, as my honourable friend from Aldershot has said, we stood united against fascism. We stood together for freedom and against tyranny during the Cold War. And today we work together in tackling poverty and the causes of poverty around the world. It is not for nothing that the historic agreement about tackling poverty was signed in 2005 in Gleneagles, in Scotland, of course.
Well, the gentleman makes an interesting point of nations who stood together under the Allied banner during the Second World War. I think it's important that we remember there were about 40 nations under the Allied banner, and particularly in Norway with the likes of Joachim Ronenberg, who was the telemark hero who made sure that Hitler didn't get heavy water and prevented probably the flattening of this city. It's not just something that's for one nation, it's the Allied umbrella, and we should thank all the Allies.
And I thank the honourable gentleman for saying that. He is absolutely right, and we must remember all nations that work together. But we stood together as the United Kingdom, together with those nations, absolutely. And we now have, as a United Kingdom, a very strong voice in the world through the G8, with our seat on the United Nations Security Council, our seats on the executive board of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other organisations, as has been mentioned before. This voice is vital, both for our own interests, but even more important, for the interests, I believe, of the citizens of the world. If I may just for a moment be a little personal, my late father-in-law, Donald Mackay from Caithness, is just an example of the fundamental, one very important but personal example of the fundamental contribution of Scots across the ages to our United Kingdom. Working on radar for the Royal Navy in Haslemere during the war, he, completely coincidentally alongside my father, who was there at the same time, and so many from across the UK and indeed, as the honourable gentleman said, from other nations, played his role in protecting our vital supply lifelines in the Atlantic and elsewhere. And this just is another example of the intellectual seriousness which a previous speaker has referred to, which Scotland and Scots so often bring to our deliberations and our work in the United Kingdom. As the honourable member for Glasgow Central said, we are part of one family in the UK. Like any family, we have our squabbles, but like any family, we stand up for each other in difficult times, shoulder to shoulder. Madam Deputy Speaker, and I believe millions of others in England and indeed the other parts of the United Kingdom care deeply about Scotland remaining in the UK. We have done so much together. Let's continue to do that.
Greg McClymont.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the debate, I think, has been an interesting one so far, and in particular from the representatives of the Nationalist Party. There has been sound and fury and passion about what they see as the great differences between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom. But I do think there's a danger that in that sound and fury and passion, the reality of what the Scottish National Party proposes in terms of changing the Union is obscured. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I mean by that is there's a rather peculiar notion at the heart of the nationalist case. That peculiar notion is that the economic and social union between the peoples of these islands should continue, but the political union should end. Now, I will come back, Madam Deputy Speaker, to examine that peculiar notion a little further and what it might mean for Scotland. But I think the fact that the Scottish National Party believe that the economic and social union should continue, indeed the White Paper is an eloquent testimony to that desire, says something about how 300 years of partnership have brought the people of these islands closer together. And that, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not surprising. We have a shared language, the honourable gentleman and others notwithstanding. We have family ties. We have a shared currency. We have free trade. We have common trade unions across the United Kingdom. Maybe in a little as I make progress. We share tastes, preferences, and, of course, a common popular culture, which is reinforced every Saturday night when the nation comes together to watch Strictly Come Dancing, above other things. And I think it is very important to recognise that the White Paper is an eloquent testimony to all that. The SNP want to argue that all these things can be retained in their current form, but the political union disappears. And why do nationalists, whose philosophy is based on a belief in difference, come to that conclusion? Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the answer is that 300 years of shared history can't be washed away. They can't be foregone. And when Alex Salmond says, as he did recently to James Naughtie, that I have a Scottish identity and I also have a British identity, that is testament to that, whether Mr Salmond himself believes it or not. What Mr Salmond knows is that the people of Scotland believes that they have mutual ties that bind us across these islands. So the SNP believe in a social and economic union, but not a political union. Let's examine that a little further, Madam Deputy Speaker. Allow me to make my argument and develop it a little further. They wish the political union to end, but the economic and social union to continue. And actually, in those circumstances, what this referendum becomes about is what is the best form of government across these islands, a point made eloquently by the member for Penrith. Well, if economic and social union is to endure, as seen in the SNP's white paper, the question becomes, how are Scotland's political interests to be represented? The answer, which Scots came up with 300 years ago, 400 years ago, even 500 years ago, was a union. They came up, John Mayor of Haddington in the lead, came up in a diabolically clever Scottish fashion with a way to create a partnership between two countries of very unequal size. And when we celebrate Robert the Bruce, we celebrate William Wallace, what we are doing is saying, because Scotland entered the Union freely, we created a partnership. We were not subordinated.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And isn't it the case that the proposals from the Scottish Government would lead to an incredible democratic deficit? Because at the moment, if people in Scotland don't like what the UK Government is doing, through MPs, they can have their say. But what will happen with a new arrangement, as proposed by the SNP, is that any negotiations would be intergovernmental. They wouldn't actually be the people of Scotland. It would just be up to what the Scottish Government could extract from negotiations of the UK Government.
My honourable friend makes a very good point. There's a very Scottish way of putting this, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Nationalists want us to have our cake and eat it. And it's very difficult to have your cake and eat it. And when Alex Salmond says, and I think this is very, very important because it illuminates the nationalist view of the world, when Alex Salmond claims that Scotland, by leaving the political union, would be in a situation where England would lose a surly lodger and gain a good neighbour, my response, Madam Deputy Speaker, is very straightforward. How can you be a lodger in your own house? We built this house together. It's our house as much as it's anyone else's house. And of course that house is refurbished, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not unchanging. The biggest constitutional change in this country in 300 years was the creation of the Scottish Parliament. The honourable gentleman doesn't like to be faced with facts. I know his speech was a fact-free zone. But the fact is, this is our house as well as the other peoples of the United Kingdom. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is the basis on which this debate must proceed. How can one continue an economic and social union, the ties that bind us that even the nationalists accept, without political representation and the place in which those social and economic decisions are made? That is the basis on which the debate about currency, about interest rates, about the continuing social ties must proceed.
Order. Before we go any further, I should point out to the House that this is a time-limited debate. There isn't much time left. There are more people who wish to speak than there is time if everybody takes the full 5 minutes. And if everyone takes the full 5 minutes plus an extra 2.5 minutes for interventions, then several honourable members who sat here all afternoon will not have the opportunity to speak at all. So I would ask people who are about to speak, out of courtesy for their colleagues, to keep within just under 5 minutes, including interventions. If we can do that, everyone will have the opportunity to speak in what is an extremely important debate. Bob Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My father Scotland needed jock
Stewart, MC, was from Glasgow and an RAF officer, and my mother was from London and in the SOE. So I'm half Scottish, and I'm half English, and I'm proudly British. And as I come from a service family and have been a soldier myself, I intend to talk about just how valuable men and women from Scotland are to our armed forces. Scottish soldiers, sailors and airmen have always had a tremendous reputation as brave, ferocious warriors. Throughout history, proportionately more Scots than English, Welsh and Irishmen have taken the Queen's shilling to fight for the Crown. Since 1707, Scottish soldiers have been a crucial part in most battles fought by the British Army. For example, the Gordon Highlanders had a leading part in the 1815 Waterloo campaign. At the Battle of Quatre Bras on the 16th of June 1815, the Gordons halted the French advance in its tracks with the bayonet. 2 days later, the regiment was in the midst of it again on the field of Waterloo. By then, casualties had reduced the gallant Gordons to about 250 men. And yet, these incredible soldiers once again charged the French frontally with the bayonet. As the Highlanders approached, the French broke into disarray and could only be caught by other Scotsmen on horses. The Scots Greys galloped past the Gordons to get at the French enemy. According to some accounts, Scottish infantrymen clung to the stirrups of the Scottish cavalry so that they could reach the enemy more easily. Isn't that wonderful? About 700,000 Scots know I've heard the rubbish from my friend too much all afternoon. About 700,000 Scots served in the First World War, with about 150,000 of them losing their lives. The Highlanders, devils in skirts or ladies from hell, earned their nickname at a battle in 1916 when the 51st Highland Division crossed a battlefield littered with the fallen to storm German positions with such force that thousands of prisoners were taken. At the end of the First World War, the 51st Highland Division was widely reckoned to be the best fighting force in France. The Second World War compounded Scottish soldiers' incredible reputation. To date, fellow members, 117 Victoria Crosses have been won by Scotsmen and, frankly, soldiers, sailors and airmen. For me personally, there is nothing more stirring than a fight than the sound of bagpipes. As British United Nations commander in Bosnia in 92-93, I used my two pipers frequently. For instance, I asked them to play at line crossings, as all of us needed courage to advance through no man's land, especially as Staff Sergeant Steve Bristow had been previously wounded beside me by a sniper. The sound of bagpipes wafting through the air was an incredible encouragement to those of us that were frightened. My mainly English soldiers loved the skirling, thrilling and impossible to miss sound of the pipes. Once there was intense fighting around my location at my base in Vitesse, I asked my piper, Lance Corporal Cleary, to stand on the roof and make an impact. He did just that. The fighting and the shooting died down quite quickly as that tremendously emotive and martial sound echoed down the valley. My purpose this afternoon was to remind the House just how important the British Army, and indeed all three services, consider the contribution made to them by men and women, their Scottish comrades. No. They form an integral part of our armed forces. I would grieve hugely if they were no longer a part of them, and I sincerely hope that will never happen.
Tom Clark.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in the short time available, I wish to focus on the question on the referendum, the issue of independence. Now, recent polls, YouGov for example, show that 29% of the people of Scotland are in favour of independence, and that's about the normal figure. So why do the SNP want a debate with David Cameron? Why are they targeting Labour voters with the nonsense that this is about Labour Scotland versus Tory England? Why do they undermine the prospect of a future United Kingdom Labour government? This is simply not supported by facts. With less than a quarter of all the Scottish people who supported the SNP in the 2011 elections, they have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. They have a mandate for a referendum, but not a mandate to be fixated upon independence. In the 2010 general election, the Labour Party received more votes than the SNP did in both the 2010 and 2011 elections. The reality is, and I say this with respect to members opposite, that the 41 Scottish Labour MPs in this House are more representative of the views of the Scottish people than the present Scottish Government. The majority of Scottish votes in the 2010 election were for centre-left parties. The same was true in England, Wales and indeed even in Northern Ireland. So we share the same values throughout the United Kingdom. The same values and indeed the same problems in Glasgow, Liverpool, Edinburgh, Birmingham, Aberdeen and Manchester. And you know what, Madam Deputy Speaker, whatever the problems, the reality is that the United Kingdom works. But in all candour, what doesn't work, and I have to say this, is the coalition's attitude to working people, rejected by Scottish, Welsh, Irish and most English people. Now the SNP disregard this and use it as an excuse to promote independence. With childcare, the Scottish Government could act now. Labour pushed hard for over a year to get the Scottish Government to act on the bedroom tax, as my colleagues have pointed out, and for purely political reasons they delayed the decision until this week. And when it comes to the issue of welfare, I wouldn't for 1 second want the Nats to regard this as a support for separatism. Who can forget, I certainly won't, the fact that they took £34 million from disabled children and their families in Scotland and spent it elsewhere, mostly on political gimmicks. The positive reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that Scotland and England's economies are interconnected. Mr Salmon called the pound a millstone around the neck of Scotland and wanted to join the euro. Now they want to opt out and keep the pound. How opportunistic can they get? The rest of the UK is Scotland's largest trading partner. With corporation tax cuts, it will become a competitor. Will Scotland be allowed to keep the pound and to cut the corporation tax as well? Madam Deputy Speaker, Mr Salmon is by nature a gambler, willing to take a risk with the Scottish economy and our people's prosperity. But there will be no way back if the people decide upon independence. I believe that the majority of our people, our kinsfolk in the United Kingdom, want Scotland to stay. The United Kingdom is not just a political system, it's our home, and we're entitled to know what the future offers. Madam Deputy Speaker, thankfully, the only people who can stop Scottish independence are the Scottish people themselves. I urge them, I passionately urge them, to reject the precarious and uncharted path of independence and separatism, which in so many ways would leave our country defenceless, exposed and alone.
Cathy Jameson.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to follow some very interesting speeches during the course of this afternoon, and I know that I only have a very brief time, so I wanted to pick up on the three themes that my honourable friend from Glasgow North East opened with around identity, economics and vision. And I may not have very much time to talk about the economics, but in terms of the currency, I think a number of other honourable members have put forward some very good arguments relating to the comments from the Governor of the Bank of England and others. But on that whole question of identity, like everyone else who's spoken today from, I think probably from all sides of the House, I'm proud of my cultural identity as a Scot. I would describe myself as Scottish, and indeed in the days when you used to write in your school jotters your full name and address, and it would then always be Shortleys, Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, Scotland, UK, Europe, the world, the universe. I recognise that other honourable members have done the same thing. But that, I think, signified how I have always seen myself and how the majority of Scots see ourselves. We are passionately proud to be Scottish, but we also see ourselves as citizens of the world, and no doubt in future years citizens of that universe as well. And I think that's why when I speak to my constituents, they raise real concerns about the idea of separating off and splitting off from the rest of the United Kingdom. In the past week, I've been at a number of meetings and I've met people from across the United Kingdom. And interestingly, the first thing that we get into talking about is the Scottish connections. So far this week, I've met people who are now living and working down here whose families come from Coatbridge, from Cambuslang, from even further afield up north in Aberdeen and Inverness. They too, although they would now describe themselves as English, because that's where their families are located, nonetheless are proud of their Scottish heritage. I'm terribly sorry, I really don't have time to take interventions because others want to speak. But the point I want to make there is that we are able to be Scottish, but at the same time to be citizens of the United Kingdom and indeed citizens of Europe, and that is very important. But I wanted just very briefly to pick up on one point, which is I think the Scottish people are entitled to have a fair and honest and courteous debate around this. Well, I mean, I hear the honourable gentleman baying at me from the other side of the benches. And what I wanted to say was that my constituents, and there are many of them, many of my constituents may well vote yes. That will be their right to decide. But the debate should take place in a courteous way. People should have the facts, they should have the information, and they should not necessarily have people shouting them down from 12 feet away. But the point I want to make also is that it's important that that information can be trustworthy and that people can have a sense that there is no political bias from government. Now, interestingly, I have been sent a copy of a press release which was issued by Transport Scotland, the transport agency in Scotland. And it starts off, the press release, the title of the press release is "Powers of Independence Would Better Support Transport." Now, I do think when we see things like this issued by a government agency in Scotland, it does give cause for concern that the civil service and the government agencies have become overly politicised, and I do think that that makes it then difficult for others to feel that they are able to speak out, because they do fear that they are somehow going to then be castigated or to suffer the consequences of that. So I do think that is something that ought to be looked at. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is, in this constant drive for additional powers, I served for 12 years in the Scottish Parliament. I saw the changes that were made. I worked with UK government ministers when I was a minister in the Scottish Executive at that time, and looked at how we could transform and move on with powers. But it's a very dangerous argument to think that simply adding more and more and more powers without any overall pattern actually is any more democratic or is likely to deliver anything further than social justice. So my argument is that we should be proud to be Scots, we should be proud to be part of the UK, and this debate will continue, but it must do so in a way that gives our constituents the opportunity to hear the arguments and make their own minds up.
Michael Connerty.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wear a badge in this House and in Scotland. It's actually got the saltire and a rose on it. It says Labour, a UK voice for Scotland. And that's the reality about Scotland's place in the UK. We have the ability, with all due respect to those on the other benches, to get rid of the government of the coalition and the things they're doing and vote in a Labour government. That's the duty of the 41 Labour members of Parliament that we get because we are in the United Kingdom. We get to choose for everyone. For me, as the member who represents 75% of Tamdale's old constituency in West Lothian, it is the answer to the West Lothian question. He wondered why he could talk about Blackburn in England but not Blackburn in Scotland. I can talk about Blackburn in both countries down here because the policies of this Parliament affect the people in England and in Scotland in both Blackburns. That's the answer. It's a permanent place in the UK I'm seeking, but one that is changing. Scotland's place in an economically safer place. UK's economic resilience is the thing that Scotland has. You think of what happened, £44.7 billion from the taxes of the UK to save RBS, plus £20 billion for HBOS, plus £20 billion for Lloyd TSB with places in Scotland. Resilience of the UK economy was the reason that we could survive that, and Scotland would not have survived it without being part of this. Quantitative easing, how much money was printed by the Bank of England to save the economy of Scotland, to keep interest rates down and save companies in Scotland and save households in Scotland. I don't like the policies that have been brought in austerity against the people of the UK, but I can understand why we need to be here to save the economy of Scotland in a UK environment. RBS announces today in The Guardian, if there's independence, RBS are switching its headquarters from Edinburgh. They sensibly realise the problem that exists if you have a Scotland cut off from the rest of the UK. The other thing that Scotland gets in the UK is because of our fiscal independence. For reasons of good socialist practice, Gordon Brown, the much criticised former Chancellor, kept us out of the Euro and kept us out of the Eurozone, kept us out of the Stability and Growth Pact, stopped him writing the budgets that they're doing now for the Eurozone countries through the 2-pack and the 6-pack that we would face. Now, the reality is, if we left, and I've been in the European Scrutiny Committee for 15 years, and the chairman has been a lot longer, we've heard Barroso say Scotland will have to reapply, and Scotland will only get back into the EU if it signs up to the Eurozone. That's the reason it's a dangerous element to leave the UK with that fiscal independence and try to renegotiate another pact. There is no question they will get back into the EU, but only if they sign up for the Eurozone fiscal disciplines. So what does that mean? We have a paper recently on what happened to Croatia, the latest entrant. Croatia's budget will be 5.4% in deficit in 2013, 6.5% in 2014 and 6.2% in 2015. Oh no, it won't, because they've been told under the Eurozone rules they will reduce their deficit to 4.6% in 2013, 3.5% in 2015 and 2.7% in 2016. They will have to slash almost 3% off their budget. If you look at what happened in Lithuania in those circumstances, a 15% collapse in their economy, a 40% cut in all public sector pay, and they're struggling now. And we were there just recently when they were in the presidency, and they said 40% of all transactions are now done under the counter, not paying tax, because that's the effect of the discipline of the Eurozone. You could, of course, go for the sterling currency union. This is the latest wheeze. A mini copy of the Eurozone, with the fiscal interest and control in the larger economy. And it was quite clear when Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, delivered the home truths in Edinburgh, and I quote from an article in the Financial Times. Here it was said basically, the desire of the Scottish Government to remain in the sterling area would, he stressed, sharply curtail Scotland's fiscal and financial independence. It's quite clear that what would happen is the bigger country would dictate the policies of the smaller country. At the moment, there are massive subsidies from England and the taxpayers for the wind farms. It's bringing our renewables up in the UK, but we're paying for them in the UK. The postal services are subsidised in exactly the same manner, and if we had an independent Scotland, independent service, it would either be a massive subsidy for the taxpayer or a massive hike in postal charges. The best thing we could do is remain in the UK and fight for change that benefits Scotland in the UK.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. It's a pleasure to be able to contribute to this debate today. Scotland has a proud and distinct history within the UK. The UK is a union state rather than a unitary state. John P. Mackintosh, a former MP for East Lothian, was a great thinker and proponent of devolution. He said, People in Scotland want a degree of government for themselves. It is not beyond the wit of man to devise the institution to meet those demands. And those words are now engraved above the Donald Dewar Room in Holyrood. Unfortunately, it was beyond the wit of the SNP, who were not part of the Scottish Constitutional Convention, where men and women across Scotland's civic society joined together to devise the Scottish Parliament, and which now provides political accountability for Scotland to make distinctive decisions about a wide range of policy. But for those of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the Labour movement, it is about so much more than political accountability. I, along with 74% of voters, said yes in September 1997. I had seen how our councils in Scotland had battled to protect our people from the worst excesses of Thatcher's government. Her plan, and we now know it was a plan, to close the pits and escalate the dispute devastated my constituency. I wanted greater protection for any future Tory government. And just yesterday in the Scottish Parliament, we've seen how that can happen. Despite John Swinney saying you didn't want to let Westminster off the hook, and Nicola Sturgeon preferring a scrap with Westminster to scrapping the bedroom tax, thanks to the efforts of Jackie Bailey, Ian Gray and the Govan Law Centre, people in my constituency and across Scotland are now protected from this inhumane measure. I also want to pay credit to my own local housing association, which itself found a legal way to protect its tenants. This is the success and power of devolution. This is the reality of having the best of both worlds. I've known since my early years that I wasn't a nationalist. I can remember a conversation in Fort William Primary School minibus when a nationalist girl took out a sweetie paper, tore it in half and explained to me that this was what happened to Scotland's wealth. Now, I acknowledge that the nationalist argument has moved on from sweetie papers since then. But what it cannot challenge today, no matter how many white papers, however much it uses our civil service for its political ends, however much it seeks to silence those who even dare to ask questions of its case, is the fact that Scotland, as part of the UK, is better placed to do good here at home and around the world. In a packed assembly rooms in Edinburgh this week, the Honourable Member for Bradford West spoke about the difference Scottish voters, MPs, have made in this place in stopping military intervention in Syria. And in the recent report from the International Development Committee, we have also seen the good that we do. I urge the voters in Scotland, do not tear my country apart and do not tear my family apart. Thank you.
Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will endeavour to be as brief as possible because I know that others are still waiting to contribute to this debate. I believe Scotland's place in the UK is about being part of one of the largest economies in Europe and the sixth largest in the world. I believe separation from the rest of the UK would give Scottish businesses an unnecessary barrier to trading with our biggest market, because we know without doubt the rest of the UK is Scotland's biggest market, and independence would turn our border into a barrier for existing and future trade. And what sense does that make? Because the open border between Scotland and the UK brings significant economic, trade and employment opportunities. As part of the UK, Scotland has access to a single market of roughly 70 million people. In addition to shared opportunities, the pooling of resources across the UK allows risk to be shared, seen most recently by the bailout of the banks by the UK Treasury. The UK Treasury used £37 billion to bail out Scottish-based banks during the world financial crisis, and that included, Madam Deputy Speaker, over 400 RBS jobs which were saved in Inverclyde. Evidence that economically and socially the Scottish people are better off being part of a union that pools risks and rewards. And of course, there is also significant UK public sector employment in Scotland. 2/3 of all civil servants in Scotland work for the UK government. Also, UK defence contracts are essential to Scottish industry. The MOD has some 700 direct contracts in Scotland supporting thousands of jobs. And of course, we also have cross-border private sector trading. Ease of doing business and contract tendering are essential for bringing success to Scottish firms in a wider UK market. Clearly, Scotland has an important economic relationship with the rest of the UK, benefiting from access to a single market comprising of tens of millions of people. Madam Deputy Speaker, the facts speak for themselves. Scottish business buys and sells more products and services from the UK than any other country in the world combined. In 2010, 70% of Scotland's exported goods went to other parts of the UK, and 70% of imports are estimated to have come from other parts of the UK. This clearly demonstrates Scotland's economic performance is stronger because it's part of a larger integrated UK economy. Exit the UK and the border becomes a barrier that will impede and restrict ease of trade. Even where free trade agreements exist alongside controlled borders, neighbouring countries with similar economies are affected by the presence of that border. Analysis finds, for example, that trade between the US and Canada is thought to be 44% lower than it could be a result of the border between them. And not just business will be disadvantaged. Labour migration between Scotland and the rest of the UK is also estimated to be as much as 75% higher within an integrated UK, allowing the sharing of skills and knowledge. Leave the UK and we create an unnecessary barrier to trade with the rest of the UK. That's why Labour's vision for Scotland is about working across borders. Our vision for Scotland is about being part of bigger, not what independence offers, part of smaller.
Sheila Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the laziest forms of political argument is to put up a straw man and then knock it down and think you've won that argument. And we had an example of that earlier this afternoon from the member from Perth and North Perthshire. Because what he said to this House and what he's saying to people in Scotland is you have two choices. You have independence or you have this, as good as it gets. That isn't the choice. If by as good as it gets, he means the policies of the current UK government, I think I am just as much opposed to those as he is, however much we might agree on other things. So it's not as good as it gets. Of course it isn't. But the way to change that is to campaign against those things. The way to change it is to win the next general election. And the way to change it is to use the powers that you already have and are indeed coming. And one thing that we never hear from the Scottish Government is the fact that we do have a Scotland Act that was passed in this place that is coming into force in a number of stages and will be bringing devolution of fiscal powers to a degree which we've not had before in Scotland. What does the Scottish Nationalist Party want to do with those powers? What is it doing with the powers it already has? In my city, people are desperate for affordable housing. Why aren't we using some of the powers we already have to increase the investment into housing to stop people in a housing crisis? There are so many things the Scottish Government could be doing with what we already have. So no, it's not as good as it gets. It's up to us to make it better within the United Kingdom.
Hear, hear. Margaret Curran.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer, and welcome to your position. Oh, Presiding Officer, Deputy Madam Speaker. 12 years in that place and I've been properly socialised. I do apologise. Deputy Madam Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker. Right. Let me start again. Right. Can I begin by thanking the Backbench Committee for this debate, and indeed thank the member for Glasgow North East for calling this debate. As ever, his contribution was substantial and well informed. What has been most striking about this debate so far has been the demand for it and the pressing nature of the time given. And I would perhaps make a call to the government, perhaps they could find time in the government schedule that we can debate such a pressing issue as this. Scotland has two parliaments, and it's important this parliament equally rises to debating such an important issue. But as I say, it was indeed a good debate, mostly a good debate. As many of you will know, I stand here to support the cause of Scotland staying within the part of the Union. But I should perhaps ask the honourable member for Perth and North Perthshire to be given more time in the next debate, because I think he makes my case so strongly for me. But as the honourable member for Glasgow Central made clear in his compelling speech, Scotland can have a new future, and it echoes the comments raised by my honourable member for Edinburgh East in conclusion, that the case here is not based on separation, not based on pulling away from our friends and allies, but by working together based on the values of solidarity and equality, we can build a new future for Scotland and for future generations of Scotland. And as my honourable friend from Glasgow North East said, this is not a binary choice we face. Scotland can have a better future. But it is clear, I think, as you move about the different parts of Scotland, as I, in the nature of my job, do, as I am in many taxis and I talk to many taxi drivers, I'm in a few bars and I talk to people in bars, not as many as I go to taxis, but in our schools and in our homes, there is a real sense that the nature of the debate has changed and we're in a new phase of that. People understand throughout Scotland that we are deciding the future of our country, for the future of our families and for generations to come. And this will be perhaps one of the biggest decisions we Scots will make in our lives, as the Honourable Member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock put so well in the debate. The effect will be felt not just by us, but by our children and our grandchildren. So across Scotland, people in the characteristic way as was demonstrated are now asking, what are the consequences of independence? What will it mean for me and my family? With very significant and real questions being asked, ordinary people had a promise from the SNP government that their questions would be answered. But it is widely recognised now throughout Scotland that the White Paper systematically failed to do that, as my honourable member for East Kilbride and Livingston indicated. We were promised that it would resonate throughout the ages, and I have to tell this House it is an absolute fact in Scotland, the view is now, that it didn't really last a fortnight. So fundamental questions still persist. Questions, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I got that right, that people ask me time and time again. Now, I know that not everyone likes to hear this, but we have to face the facts and spell out the real impact for people across Scotland of independence. It is time, I would say, to get real about the independence debate. And I want to spell out what separation would mean to families across Scotland and respond to some of the concerns about independence that people have raised with me. We need to get away from the clichés and the jargon and make this debate real for ordinary people across Scotland. And let me be clear directly with comments from the First Minister today. I've got news for the First Minister of Scotland. No one exemplifies the political elite more these days than Alex Salmond, the First Minister. He is enjoying so much the comforts of his office that I think he has forgotten his primary duty should be to be straight with the people of Scotland. And I would make a call to the First Minister that it's time to get away from the dinner circuit and get out and start telling the people of Scotland the real truth about independence. I want to share a number of facts with the House which I believe people across Scotland should know before they cast their vote. Because I know when I'm talking to people, I'm sure other members have the same experience, the fundamental question they are asking themselves is, will it make me better or will it make me worse off? It's not a surprise, therefore, that arguments about currency, about borrowing and about financial regulation have dominated the debate so much so far. But what would the Nationalist plans for the currency actually mean to families? According to independent experts, it would mean higher interest rates. We've been told that they estimate around 1.5 higher than the rest of the UK. But what does that actually mean in practice if you're struggling raising your family and you're trying to get by working? What does that mean to you? It means, in fact, your credit card borrowing costs will be higher. It means if you buy your Christmas presents and pay them off throughout the year, the costs of paying that off will be higher. You will be paying more. And it means that if you're trying to pay off your mortgage, it will take you longer in Scotland to do that. And then, when we talk about the Bank of England, why is it so important and what does it mean? At the moment, the Bank of England sets the interest rates, determining how much you pay on your mortgage. So under the SNP's plan, when you live in Scotland, our mortgage rates would be set by a bank here in London, over which Scotland would have absolutely no control and no say. How is that empowering the people of Scotland? Secondly, We've spoken about how working across the UK means we keep the cost of goods and services low. That's because, as the major supermarkets have told us, working in a market of 60 million allows the cost to be spread over the current market of 5 in Scotland. So what does that really mean? It means they, and I quote, would treat it as an international market by putting up our prices. Not my words, Madam Speaker, but the words of one supermarket boss in the Financial Times recently. Endorsed, it has to be said, by the Shop Workers Trade Union USDO, because they're worried about higher costs for ordinary working people in Scotland. So this is why this all matters. The National Association of Pension Funds said the value of pension funds would be eroded in an independent Scotland. And the Scottish Financial Enterprise has warned that Scotland faces a multi-million pounds bill for a new regulator. And what does that mean? It means, in short, that our pension contributions will be paying for independence, and it's time that the First Minister got straight with the Scottish people and told them that cross-border pension costs resulting from independence would increase costs in Scotland and undermine and erode the value of our pensions. And finally, what does it tell us about Scotland's public finances? Now, I don't believe for a second, and again it's time the SNP were not allowed to put up this straw man, I don't believe for a second that Scotland couldn't survive as an independent country. But surviving isn't thriving. And we know that right now, Scotland gets back from the UK more than it pays in. In the year 2010-11, Scotland contributed £56.9 billion into the shared UK pot and got back £64.5 billion. So what does this mean for Scottish families? It means that we have £1,200 more per head. And for those of us on this side of the House, the ability to redistribute across the UK, for us, this is a point of pride. Madam Deputy Speaker, my approach to the referendum is very simple. When we look at the great strength that Scotland has, its great geography, our industries, the resilience and resourcefulness and the skill of our people, we look and see what kind of future we can have with such great strengths. We have enormous challenges too. We need to fight the poverty that's still so deep-bedded, and we need to tackle ill health. But the way forward to meet those challenges and to maximise that resource is to use the values that have built the great achievements of the past, from the NHS to the welfare state. And with those enduring values, we will work together in partnership for a new Scotland and a new times, not pulling away with a deceit on the Scottish people, but a promise to work in partnership for a better world and a better future. Thank you.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by adding my congratulations to the honourable member for Glasgow North East in securing this debate, and place on record my gratitude to the Backbench Business Committee for selecting it. We have had today, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think, a quite excellent debate, made all the better, I think, for the fact that we have heard voices in this debate from across the whole of the United Kingdom. It has been a debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, that has brought contributions of both passion and intellect, and I think that we should thank all those who have taken part in it. This Parliament is one of Scotland's two parliaments, and it is right that we should take the opportunity to discuss Scotland's future at this crucial moment in our history. This Parliament makes key decisions for Scotland as part of the United Kingdom in many areas: the economy, defence, international relations and pensions, to list but a few. As an integral part of the United Kingdom, this Parliament and those within it who represent constituents right across the UK make decisions on behalf of the whole of the United Kingdom. But this Parliament also recognised in 1997 that some decisions are better taken closer to the people. It was through this House that the Scotland Act of 1998 was delivered, providing real devolution of power within a strong United Kingdom. That decision was revisited by the work of the Calman Commission in 2008 and then implemented in the Scotland Act of 2012. The balance of powers between this Parliament and the Scottish Parliament is a dynamic settlement and will rightly continue to be so. And where that balance is struck is a debate which presupposes our continued membership of the United Kingdom family. The question facing us on the 18th of September is a quite different one. Should we remain part of that family, or should we become an independent country? Choosing to leave the United Kingdom would be a fundamental and irreversible step. As part of the UK family, we have a shared history and share many common values. As part of the United Kingdom, those of us in Scotland, like people living in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, benefit from the UK's size and scale. We benefit from the UK's international influence. We benefit from the UK's economic strength. Scotland, like the rest of the United Kingdom, contributes towards these benefits. We contribute in all manners of ways, economically, culturally and socially. As the Honourable Member for Carlisle put it, together we are truly greater than the sum of our constituent parts. However, if we vote for independence, we walk away from these benefits. Scotland's future would be based on a series of protracted negotiations with dozens of different states and organisations. What currency would Scotland use? How would Scotland join the EU, and what terms of membership would it be able to secure? Would Scotland have to join the Euro or the Schengen Agreement? These are all questions to which the people of Scotland want answers. The nationalists owe them answers in a second, but so far they have failed to deliver them. The truth is that all these issues would require negotiations, detailed negotiations, to pull Scotland out of a United Kingdom family of which it has been an integral part for over 300 years, and to establish a new set of international relationships. Independence is a 20th century or maybe even a 19th century solution in search of a 21st century problem. Across a world where change comes at a breathtaking pace, the prevailing trend is to pull down barriers and borders, not to put them up. Of course, I give way.
The honourable gentleman has said that some questions need to be answered. We do know that some questions can only be answered by a member state going to the European Commission. As the Scottish Secretary, and should be Scotland's man in Westminster rather than Westminster's man in Scotland, will he ensure that the UK Government do indeed go to the European Commission and get these vital questions answered, the questions he calls vital?
The answers to these questions, if they were ever to be posed, would not be given by the EU Commission. They would be given by the members of the EU, the 28 member states. And since he's given us the opportunity to remind the House, we've already heard from a number of these people that it would not be a straightforward, painless process. If Scotland walks away from the United Kingdom, then Scotland walks away from membership of the EU and would be required to negotiate her way back in. As part of the United Kingdom, Scotland enjoys the best of both worlds. We have a strong Scottish Parliament in charge of key areas of Scottish life: health, education, transport, criminal justice. And where it makes sense, key decisions of the state are reserved to the UK Government and Parliament here to take on behalf of all citizens across the United Kingdom. Ours is a flexible settlement. Where it makes sense to do so, we revise the settlement, providing further powers to increase the Scottish Government and Parliament's responsibility and, crucially, their accountability, not just for spending money, but for raising it too. The Scotland Act of 2012 will substantially increase the Scottish Parliament's powers and does so on the basis of evidence, consensus and consideration, ensuring that we adapt and evolve, but never at the expense of losing what works well and what works in the interests of all, right across the United Kingdom. All of this, the creation of a Scottish Parliament, the provision of further powers for that Parliament, all of this has been designed by Scots, delivered by Scots, for Scots, through this United Kingdom Parliament. Our devolution settlement is well and truly stamped made in Scotland. But right now, the issue on which we are all focused is whether or not Scotland will remain part of that union. And I want to turn, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the question of currency, which has featured strongly in this debate. And little wonder. The currency that we use is vital to all of us. For individuals buying food and paying off loans, for businesses paying employees, trading with one another across borders, for our banks and financial institutions, and of course for Scotland's economy as a whole. Last week, the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, set out his views on currency unions in very measured and, as he described it, technocratic terms. Governor Carney highlighted the principal difficulties of entering a currency union, losing national sovereignty, practical risks of financial instability, and having to provide fiscal support to bail out another country. A currency union would involve giving up some national sovereignty over economic policy. Why would it be in an independent Scotland's interest to join a currency union? No, it wasn't worth taking his last one. I'm not taking this one. There would be severe limits to Scotland's economic freedom, and there would be a risk of losing economic resilience and credibility. And what about the continuing United Kingdom? We heard on this from the honourable member for Chichester. A currency union would expose the continuing United Kingdom to the risk of bailing out banks in an independent Scotland if they were to get into difficulties again. Banks over which they would have no control, regulated under a different system in a foreign country. That is why we have consistently said that it is highly unlikely that a currency union could be agreed, because it is highly unlikely that a currency union could be made to work. No one should vote for an independent Scotland on the basis that they will get to keep the UK pound sterling. Independence means leaving the United Kingdom's monetary union. The only way for Scotland to be sure of keeping the UK pound as it is now is to stay in the United Kingdom. And nothing that the Scottish Government has asserted changes that reality. Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this week I was asked by a journalist what did I expect to be doing on the 19th of September this year. And I was able to reply that I am virtually certain that I shall be celebrating the continuation of a highly successful union. A union which has been built on shared effort, common endeavour and, yes, love. The 19th of September, Madam Deputy Speaker, is my 27th wedding anniversary. And as I celebrate that anniversary with my English-born wife and my half-English, half-Scottish children, I am confident but by no means complacent that we shall be able to toast the continuation of that other highly successful union, the one between England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Sum up for 2 minutes. William Bain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have had a very interesting afternoon, a debate that has shown the best of this House of Commons, at times irreverent, moving, witty, but also providing very serious analysis of very serious factual issues around this whole discussion of the Constitution of the United Kingdom. We heard 25 other contributions from the backbenches. It would be insufficient time to run through all of them, but I was particularly struck with the first, that from the Honourable Member for Chichester, the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, who emphasised very clearly that for a functioning currency union you need to have a banking union, and as my honourable friend for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch, he said, you must also have a political union too. And as Martin Wolfe wrote in the FT last week, the Bank of England cannot serve two masters, and I think that was the point that came from the honourable gentleman's contribution. My honourable friend from Glasgow Central spoke passionately about the contribution of the UK Labour movement in Scotland's development, The Right Honourable Gentleman for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk spoke about the scale and extent of the positive potential that exists in Scotland's economy if we make the right choice in this referendum in terms of our energy policy and keeping the family of nations that is the United Kingdom together. The Honourable Member for Penrith and the Border, together with other Honourable Members, spoke about the case for head and heart of keeping the United Kingdom together. And other Honourable Members referred to our links with the European Union and the risks that this debate causes to those. Madam Deputy Speaker, this has been a political, economic, social and cultural union that has been more than the sum of its parts for the last 300 years. It is my hope that this will not be the last time that this House of Commons discusses that union, and that we shall celebrate the continuation of that union for many decades and centuries to come.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to